and all your treats. And when I was paying and I was leaving, I noticed that they gave me a 5% senior citizen discount. And I think the worst part of it was that they didn't even ask me how old I was. They just gave it to me. So, I'm not really sure how I feel about that yet. But nonetheless, I'm all about saving money, and we're very grateful to the foundation for funding our breakfast this morning. Thank you. I know there's no one from the foundation here, but we are very grateful. And I also want to thank the hospitality committee who has graciously presented everything for you. It's Esther Marie for me, Annie Sayers, Jen X. Horn, Mary Beatty Sharisky. I hope I didn't forget anybody. And of course, our amazing cafeteria staff is always there to help us when we need help. So we have a lot of stuff back there for you, and please help yourself. Okay, we're going to get started. The first thing we have this morning is Kevin Devine and Nick's speech. Well, let's let Nancy say hello first of all. No? Come on up and say hello. No? Okay, sorry. Nick's speech and Kevin Devine. Want to tell you a little bit about the OCVTS presence on social media.
Good morning, everybody. I already forgot who I was. I'm Kevin Devine. Nice to be here today. It's always great, too, when you're speaking and you see Mark Lamb in front of Love Row. I feel so supported with him right there. Back me up. Nick and I, along with the Communication Task Force, have been working to develop a social presence. Nick has been on Facebook for over a year now with OCVTS, and many of you like us on Facebook, and we appreciate that. Just wanted to update everybody and say that we're now on Twitter. Nick also has his YouTube page as well, and we're also on Instagram. What we're going to be doing with this is important announcements. We're going to post student projects, invites to special events, news updates. We're also going to do school closings on social media as well. So it's a really great way to get to the students. We're hoping we're up to about 60 followers now. So we're hoping with your support, we can get more followers, and we're going to have this poster throughout the buildings. There'll be about 6 posters per building. We're also going to do some postcards to hand out to students as well, and we're hoping that we'll get some followers. We are getting followers. It's just it's a process that has to take place. So. We're also going to do something to highlight student work. We're going to call it Twitter Tuesdays, and I'm working with the principals at this time to develop a schedule, maybe like a building a month. Your buildings will be featured 1 month. The principals will pick two programs to highlight, and we're going to post some student activities. So if major out in the field, that'll be a great time to highlight what you guys are doing. Culinary. Great time to take some pictures of your work and whatnot. So we've already done that a little bit. I don't know if some of you that do follow us on Twitter probably saw us posting costumes and things like that on Halloween. And actually, I had a good time with that hashtagging and everything else. And it's important to note that our hashtag that we'll put on everything is hashtag OCVTS. So if you search hashtag OCVTS, anything that comes up with that hashtag, we'll be able to see. So if you get your students to post something when they get home, of course, if they post something to OCVTS, we'll be able to search that, and Nick or I, Nicole Wallner, or Jim Sullivan will retweet that, so it's kind of connected to us in that way. So again, I just wanted to give you guys some updates. You will see some more information coming your way via your building principals at their staff meetings. So if you have any suggestions for me, I'm always open to suggestions. So, send them my way. All right. I just wanted to update everybody. Enjoy your time. It's great to have Mark again. Thanks for support. And you've got a really great speaker coming up. Yeah, Tom.
Our district, this has come up since the beginning of the year. Our district internet policy forbids us to mention OCVTS or our students gold medals and stuff like that. I have to stop doing that. Okay, so district internet policy. So I think there's more than meets the key in this room.
I'm sure, and I think that's something that,
Like a friend, it goes to everybody you're friends with, and everybody you like, which is in direct contradiction needs to be.
I don't profess to have all of the answers, but we did modify our policy from what it was at the beginning of the year, so that if there were educational purposes, I don't have the policy in front of me, so I'm not going to pretend to quote the policy, but there was a disclosure about educational use. It's a problem across the state. It's not just vocational school or just our district. How do you use social media and the technology for educational purposes but still follow the policy? Because we all know we can get ourselves in trouble with some of the social media that's out there. And I don't want to be on the front page of the paper, and I don't think any of you want to be on there for the same reasons. But there is some disclosure, so maybe we can take a better look at that policy, because we understand that we have to use this. We have to use the social media, Twitter accounts, and I just opened a Twitter account. I made one tweet last week, so I'm getting there myself. But I will have this conversation at the superintendent's meeting, and we will bring it back to your buildings at the building level with just that issue. How do we stay with the social media and continue to stay within our policy for our own protection? Because those policies are not out there to hurt us, they're out there to protect us. So, and we also spoke about using the social media. If you had a class project going on, that you would be able to use your phone to tweet, this is what's going on in my classroom. And I agree, that's a great thing. But yet we tell our students they can't use their phones in the classroom. So, you know, it's an issue. We're aware it's an issue, and we are looking at it. But we're trying to make headway, so good point.
so she said it all. I'm pretty much done. I kind of thought that was going to come up as well, and I'm glad that Nancy was here to kind of further explain that. So, Lori, you ready? Nick is here for support because he's our tech guy. So I forgot to thank him for his support. I don't have more time. Lori, you ready?
Okay, thanks, Kevin. So we'll all be sending our pictures and our information to Kevin so we can get it out there. Okay, next we have a speaker. We have so many. First we have, I'm going to introduce our speaker, and then I know Nancy wants to say a few words too, so we'll do it that way. The gentleman that's going to be talking to us today about special education is Mr. Ollie Lockerson. He has 41 years of experience in education. Most recently, 16 years as the Director of Special Services for Manchester Township School District. And he's also a lecturer for several colleges in our area. We're very proud to have him today. And I'm going to let Nancy introduce him.
So yesterday about 3 o'clock, I'm thinking about this in-service program that we have going on. And, making sure that, and Lori's been great, so, she helped put it all together. And knowing that Ali was going to be our guest speaker, and as much as we stand here today talking about social media and recruitment, because it's all about how we're a school of choice, how do we recruit, how do we get students to come to vocational school? And I'm saying, I tried to reach Gert Silsby, but it was 3 o'clock, it was too late. I asked Kevin, I said, do we have the old recruitment videos in student service? He goes, probably. And I said, because the first recruitment video that I remember, Ollie Lockerson, who was working with the child study teams, I believe, at Manchester, was in the dining room at the Brick Center and was in that video. He wasn't presenting, he was sitting there listening to probably one of us present about what was happening in vocational school. It wasn't me presenting at that time. But I think that was in the late 70s, and it was one of our first recruitment videos. So I really wanted to put his picture up here so we could all see what Ollie looked like in 1979. He looked exactly the same. So anyway, I was around at that time, and so was Ollie. So that's all good stuff. But Ollie's been a friend to vocational school for several years. And I know that for many years, if we had a question in special ed or an accommodation question and we weren't sure how to handle it, the person that we called was Ollie in Manchester and said, okay, what would you do? How do we take care of this? So he's always been a friend of vocational school. So I want to welcome him. And the other thing I wanted to say is we're going to be out of here by 12:30 today. Don't forget to vote. I was fortunate enough, I was nobody in the line when I passed, so I pulled in this morning and I voted before I got here, but don't forget to vote. And one other thing I wanted to say, happy birthday, Nicole Fredrickson. Happy birthday.
Hello, everybody. I want to give you just a little bit more of my background because I come here with baggage, and the information that I'm going to share with you today is based on that baggage that I bring. Some of it you may agree with, some of it you may not, but I think it's pretty important. So I have all 41 of my years are in Manchester Township, elementary, middle school, high school. In 1983, I became the assistant principal at Manchester Township High School. Now, I say that for one reason, because if there's one thing I know about vocational school people, is they have walked the walk, if you know what I mean. You've been there, you've done that. So I was an assistant principal from 83 to 92. 92 to 98, I became the principal of the regional day school in Jackson, which is owned by the State Department of Education and is a division of the Manchester Township School District. Okay, with that particular program, 2/3 of the population are developmentally disabled, now intellectually disabled is the new term. Okay, and 1/3 of the population are emotionally disturbed children. That's where I kind of earned my stripes. Now, when I was at the high school, those were the days when there was only one assistant principal. So, of course, I did all the discipline, special ed, and phys ed at that time. Okay, so a lot of what I'm going to be sharing with you is a result of my experiences in both of those schools. And then from 98 until the present, I've been the director of special services, and I kind of specialize in crisis situations. So I'm actually going to share with you some information and some principles that are related to crisis as well, because I'm sure that you've gone through that situation. So I'm going to start at very general methodologies and strategies that we can be using with all students that will also very specifically address the needs of special education children. And we're going to talk about characteristics of SLD children, okay, specific learning disabilities. And I'm going to do that because 50% of all special education children fit into that category. 10% of those children are sitting in your classes. And sometimes you wonder, what on earth are they doing? Why are they acting that way? I'm going to try to explain why they act that way, okay? And then maybe some strategies that we can address. But I definitely will get into some behavior issues as well. So we'll try to go over the whole gamut. Now, the first break is what time? Is it 9:15, 9:30, 9:30? Anybody know? You can let me know as I go through. I just don't want to run over. One thing I learned a long time ago, like let's just say the break starts at 9:15. If I start at stop at 9:14, I'm a hero. Okay? Okay, 9:30. So if I stop at 9:29, I'm a hero. If I stop at 9:31, I'm an absolute bum. Okay, so I'm always sure to go with those kinds of things. So we're going to try to do some high-tech stuff here. I'm not too far away from the overhead projector situation. So one of the things that I always like to share when we begin to do some in-servicing, because I know there's a couple of you that are sitting in here saying, oh my God, we've got to go through another in-service, we never learn anything at these anyway, every once in a while that happens. Okay, and some people say to me, my goodness, you've been here doing this for 41 years, how do you remain highly motivated after 41 years? Well, I know this sounds sappy, okay, but I'm going to just explain a few of the quotes that I revisit every once in a while. And I am suggesting that all of you do this at one time or another. Because if there's one thing I know for sure, if I were to retire tomorrow, there's more that I don't know than what I do know, even after doing this for 41 years, which is absolutely crazy. So in my opinion, how on earth can you get bored of what you're doing, So one of the things that I suggest that everybody ask themselves once in a while, now this could be quarterly, this could be every semester, this could be once a year, or whatever, but I want you to ask yourself, how good are you compared to how good you could be? So right now, you know, as an assistant superintendent, the answer would say, how good am I as an assistant superintendent compared to how good I could be? I could say, how good am I as a director of special services compared to how good I could be? How good am I as an educational lecturer at Georgian Court College? And by the way, I didn't mention I've been at Georgian Court for 31 straight years every semester. So that's another thing that's going on. But I asked myself that question, and I want you to ask yourself that question as teachers and educators. And normally, what do you suppose most people say to me? Okay, anybody? What do you suppose they most say? Do they say, oh man, I am there's nothing else I have to learn? No, I'm seeing some of your reactions. You say what? I think I'm pretty good, but what? I can always be better. Okay, so what I do on a regular basis, I try to figure out what are some of the things that I can do that will help me become better. Okay, and hopefully, by the end of this workshop this morning, I'm going to ask you the question, do you think you're just a little bit better now than you were starting at about 8:15? Hopefully you're going to answer that question yes. The other thing is I want you to understand the concept that if you do what you've done, you will get what you've got. Are any of you 100% satisfied with everything that you're doing? Anybody at all? I don't think so, right? You're not. So I want you to understand that if you do what you've done, you'll get what you've got, which means if you want to get better, what do you have to do? You have to change, for goodness sakes, and do things differently. If your test scores aren't high enough, if the grades aren't high enough, if your behavior management skills are not good enough, you've got to hone in there and you've got to try to figure out what you're doing, which means you actually have to change. Okay, so let's skip that third one just for a second, but it's the unlucky who learn from experience. It's the lucky who learn from the experience of others. This is a Ronald Marsh quote. He's a behavior manager in Toronto, Canada. When I heard this, it makes so much sense. It's the unlucky who learn from experience. That's the reason why during the first 3 years of their experience in education, 30 to 50% of our teachers actually leave the profession the first 3 years. And it's because it's not what they thought it was going to be, or they're not as good as they thought they were going to be. So what you need to do is you need to find a mentor. You need to find somebody who has a positive perspective of education. I am encouraging you not to hang out with negative people. Okay? Stay away from them. Don't look at them right now either. But don't hang out with negative people, for goodness sakes. So it's the unlucky who learn from experience. It's the lucky who learn from the experience of others. And the next one is Shakespearean. I believe it comes from As You Like It, but I might be corrected here. And it's sweet are the uses of adversity. Okay, and what I'm meaning there is that, listen, we are all going to blow it at one time or another. Would you agree? There's going to be some time that something goes wrong and we don't do things appropriately or whatever the case may be. But what do we have to do when that happens? We have to learn from our mistakes, for goodness sake. So sweet are the uses of adversity. So it is something very good. And then the last one, I really look at two different ways. Whether you think you can use this information that I'm sharing with you today, or whether you think you can't, you're right. Okay? And I believe this comes from Henry Ford, believe it or not. Okay? But if you think this is going to be valuable information, and listen, how many times do you think you need to utilize something before it becomes a regular part of your teaching repertoire? Does anybody have any idea? It's like 35 to 45 times that you have to use something. So you just don't come in here, look at it, go into your class tomorrow and try it one time, and then you have it. You need to utilize it 35 to 45 times. So whether you think you can use the information I'm sharing, or whether you think you can't, you are absolutely correct. But here is my pet peeve. Okay? When those children are lining up at your door in the beginning of the school year, whether you think they can or whether you think they can't, you are probably right. Because there's this whole thing, guys, with the expectations of events can actually cause them to happen. So if you're hearing some nightmare stories about kids, and that independent variable is placed in your head, okay, and then it actually can become a self-fulfilling prophecy, okay, and that's not something that we want to occur. We want all of you to evaluate and assess children based on your experiences with them, not based on some problems that they've had with other teachers. Because I bet you, 100 to 1 that there's people in here that heard nightmare stories about children you were teaching, okay, and then you turn around and say, what are they talking about? These kids are excellent. And it's really because of some of the methodologies and strategies that you are using. So when those children enter the beginning of the year, it's so important to judge them after you've experienced them as opposed to other people. So it is that self-fulfilling prophecy. See, I want everybody to become a positive Pygmalion. What that means is that you have high expectations for all children who are coming into your class. And if you all and parents have high expectations for their children, then the Galatea effect kicks in, which means they begin to have high expectations for themselves. So again, extremely important. And let's go back to the one that I skipped. Try to treat children the way you would want to be treated by any other adults. There's so many times, and we don't realize sometimes until we're parents, how this really does emotionally affect a number of the people and the families that we're coming from, where the children are coming from. So anyway, guys, this is kind of what keeps me highly motivated. Whether I ask myself these questions on a regular basis, quarterly, semester, or once a year, I always know that regardless of how I'm doing, I can do a great deal better in a number of other situations. Okay, so the child is the priority. How do we keep that child highly motivated? Now, Lori, is there any way we can show that clip? Okay, I'm going to show you a short clip, and this is kind of bringing everything together. Has anybody ever seen When the Chips Are Down in Here by Rick LaVoy? Rick LaVoy is an expert with SLE children. Okay, he comes from the New England area. He has like a 9-minute clip here. You go to Scene Selections. Okay, and I think this is so meaningful, not only as a teacher, but also as a parent if you have children. So we're going to take a look at this.
What it all comes down to, what the entire purpose of this series is basically our ability to work better and work more effectively with kids. And whenever anybody comes to a workshop like this, it's somewhere in the beginning, middle, or end of the workshop, the speaker says, you've got to work on the child's self-esteem. How do you do that? How do you build the child's self-esteem? Well, I've come up with an analogy that I think works. In order to build a child's self-esteem and work on a child's self-esteem, I would ask you to think of self-esteem as being poker chips. Self-esteem is basically poker chips. If you've got a good self-esteem, a strong self-esteem, you've got a lot of poker chips. And if you've got a poor self-esteem, a low self-esteem, you don't have many poker chips. Simple as that. Let's talk about two children who go to the school that your child goes to. These two children go to every school in the country. One child is named Joe Cool. Joe Cool has tons and tons and tons of poker chips. How did he get all those poker chips? By good things happening to him. When good things happen to you, you get poker chips. Captain of the football team, he has 10,000 poker chips. Voted king of the homecoming dance, he has 15,000 poker chips. Gets a picture in the paper for scoring a winning touchdown, he has 12,000 poker chips. This kid's got millions and millions of poker chips. He's had a charmed life, God bless him. He feels great about himself, and he should. Now you also lose poker chips when bad things happen to you. You go to the prom with Joe Cool goes to the prom with the best looking girl on campus. 20,000 poker chips. Prom night comes, he's got a pimple on the end of his nose. He loses 3,000 poker chips, but he still has a net gain of 17,000 poker chips. He's still 17,000 poker chips ahead. And this kid goes to school every day with his baskets and bags full of poker chips. And sitting next to him is Larry, the learning disabled kid. Larry, the learning disabled kid, has poker chips like this. This is it. This is all he's ever got. Never been golden captain of anything. Didn't go to the prom. Never been on a team. Never got 100 in the test. Didn't blow the top off his SATs. Didn't even take his SATs. He's got a stack of poker chips like this. And now with the inclusion movement, we make those two kids go to school together and compete against each other in the games of school. I would submit to you that that's not fair. I would submit that that's not fair. Anybody play poker here? Any poker players here? Sir, Chris, could you join me up here with Mike? Suppose, Chris, I would say, ask you if you want to play poker. And I said, Chris, here's basically the deal. You're going to have this many poker chips, okay? I'm going to have, there you go, I'm going to have all the poker chips in the Western world. I've got basically 10 million poker chips back there. I'm going to play poker against you. What would be your first response? Would you want to play? No, okay. His first response would be, I don't want to play. What do we think the learning disabled kid is saying to us when he says, I don't want to go to school today, Mark? Don't make me go. I got one of those stomach aches again, Mark. Don't make me go. Please don't make me go to school today. What's he saying to you? He's saying, I don't have enough chips to get the game. I don't have enough chips. Don't make me play this game. But we say, then you got to play it. The law says you've got to play, you've got to go to school. So I say to you, Chris, you've got to play poker with me. You're going to have that many chips, and I have bundles and bundles of chips back here. How would you play, Chris? Would you play conservatively, or would you play recklessly?
Probably reckless.
Probably recklessly. He would be the one, he would be one of those who would say, I'll bet the whole thing, I don't care. That's what the learning disabled kid when he says, that's what the learning disabled kid says when he says, sure, I can walk along the edge of that building. Sure, I can try dope. Sure, I can join that. I can join the group. I can do that. In other words, I'm just going to be spontaneous and do anything. I'm just going to bet the whole thing. I don't care. I'll just bet the whole thing. Would any of you play conservatively? Yeah, some people are saying, I play conservatively. I just bet one chip at a time. That's what the kid with the learning disability is saying to you when he says, no, I don't want to ask anybody in the dance. Don't ask me too much. I don't want to put anything in the science fair. I don't want to go to summer school. I'm going to take the chips that I've got, and I'm going to hold on tight to those, and I'm not going to let these go. And in school, we made these two kids play the game of school against each other, and I would submit to you that that's not fair. So in class, the first day, we're in class one day, and the teacher says, who was the president of the United States during the Civil War? And Joe Cool's sitting there and he's saying, I think it was Calvin Coolidge, but I'm not sure. Well, what the heck? I got 10 million poker chips. If I get this answer wrong, it's only going to cost me 5. Was it Calvin Coolidge? Teacher says, no. Larry, the learning disabled kid, is sitting there and he's looking at this little stack of poker chips. He's got 25 poker chips to his name. And he's thinking, I think the answer is Abraham Lincoln. I think the answer is Abraham Lincoln, but I just don't dare answer. I don't dare respond because I have another game I've got to play at lunch. You see, yesterday when I went to lunch, I gave the lunch lady, the one with the hairnet and the tattoo, I gave the lunch lady a $20 bill and she only gave me change for a 10. And my father said, don't you come back without that extra $10. You go to that lady and you tell her she gave me the wrong change. And he's thinking, that's going to take me 25 chips. It's going to take 25 chips for me to go and ask that lady for my money back. So I don't dare play in this game because if I lose the chips, I won't have enough to play in the game I'm going to play at lunch. And the teacher says, the right answer is Abraham Lincoln. And I go, oh, I should have done it. I should have done it. The reality is that the self-esteem of our kids, the problem with the self-esteem of our kids is they just don't have enough poker chips. The solution is to give them poker chips. How do you give kids poker chips? How do you build their self-esteem? One is you find, if you're a parent or you're a teacher, you find the island, what Bob Brooks calls the island of confidence. You find the one thing that child can do well and you make a big deal out of that. You celebrate that. You make that very important. If you're a mom and the only thing your child knows how to do is use a Phillips head screwdriver, every Thursday before he gets off the bus, you loosen every bloody screw in the house. And when he gets off the bus, you give him a screwdriver and you say, go to a path, because nobody does it like you. You're going to be a talent scout. You've got to find things he does well. You got to find, because every time you praise a child, every time you say, that was a good job, you're giving him poker chips. Parenting is pretty simple. Being a teacher is pretty simple. It all comes down to this. Your job is to make sure that every child you deal with has more poker chips when he goes to bed that night than he or she had when they got up in the morning. That's it. It's that simple. And how do you make sure they have poker chips? You give as many poker chips as possible. Secondly, you take away only as many poker chips as necessary. Please listen to me, dads, because we dads are real good at this. Let's say that Chris is my son. And Chris is sitting in class, sitting at the dinner table. One couple of hands like that for me, Chris. Chris is sitting at the dinner table and he's got that many poker chips. He's got that many chips. And we're sitting at the dinner table and Chris spills his milk. And I said, you know, Chris, sometimes you make me sick. You know, you get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and say, how can I spoil Dad's day? Is that what your problem is? You're the only one in the family who does this. Sometimes I even wonder why we have you in this family. Go to your own. And he goes up to his room. And the rest of the family sitting there, oh boy. And I sit there and I think, oh boy, that was pretty rough. It was pretty rough on old Chris. That's pretty tough on Chris. I wasn't really mad at Chris. I was mad at my secretary. So I should go apologize to him. So I go up and I sit at the edge of Chris's bed and I stroke his hair and I say, gee, Chris, I'm sorry, pal. I shouldn't have yelled at you that way. I shouldn't have yelled at you that way. That was wrong. That won't happen again. Sorry, Dad. Sorry, Dad. Yelling at him in front of the family, telling him you wish he wasn't in the family, asking him if he plans how to spoil your day, telling him you're basically sick of seeing him when you come home from work. You took away 50, 60,000 poker chips from him. Sitting here with his dad, stroke his hair, telling you love him, 5,000 poker chips at the most. You're still 55,000 poker chips behind the 8 ball. You can't do that with our kids. You can't take away those massive number of poker chips without realizing that you're making your job as a parent much tougher. And lastly, you've got to get as many as you can. Take away only what's necessary. And lastly, you've got to be willing to go to the mat with people who take poker chips away from your child and not give any back. Teachers take away chips. Bus drivers take away chips. Principals take away chips. But most of us also give chips back. And if you take both chips away from a kid, but then give some back, that's okay. There's a lot of people in your child's life who play that role. But the bottom line is, if there's someone in your child's life who is taking poker chips away and not giving any back, they're making your life much tougher. What are we going to deal with this? That's what advocacy means. Standing up for someone who can't stand up for themselves. If you're a teacher or a parent, you've got to be willing to go to the mat with people who take chips away from your kid and not give any back. You're a mom, you get up in the morning, you make them French toast. Oh man, 20,000 chips. You lay out his favorite clothes, a Beavis and Butthead t-shirt that he loves, and you make 15,000 chips. You put his books at the door, ready for him to go out the door, 10,000 chips. You warm up the maple syrup, oh my God. You warm up the maple syrup, another 5,000 chips. You have a nice breakfast with him, you give him a big kiss, and you send him out the door with a great big hug and kiss, and 50,000 brand new poker chips. And he steps on the school bus, and the school bus driver says, well, here's the retard. You might as well stay home, you might as well stay in bed, man. You might as well stay in bed. Because that one comment took 60,000 chips away from your son. 60,000 chips away like this, you might as well stay in bed. Because all the chips that you gave to your child were just taken away. Being a parent, being a teacher is not all that complicated. It's all a matter of poker chips. None of us want to think about what happens to a child at 18 and 19 years old that doesn't have enough poker chips to play the games of life. You know how many poker chips it takes to ask for your first job? You know how many poker chips it takes to ask someone to marry you? Thousands and thousands of poker chips. One of the reasons that many adult or learning disabilities have problems, they just don't have enough poker chips to get into the games of adult life. And when you don't have enough poker chips, suddenly suicide begins to make sense. Drug abuse begins to make sense. Gangs begin to make sense. Our job is as simple as this, to make sure that every child who crosses our path, as a parent or a teacher, every child that crosses our path has more poker chips when he goes to bed that night than when he gets up in the morning. It's that simple. And hopefully this is that. Thank you very much.
Basically, guys, I always felt that I was really good with everybody else's children. And then when I saw this, I felt horribly guilty about the way I treated my kids at times, you know, when they were being raised. And I think I would love to run into every one of you 5 years from now, and you remember this film clip, okay? Because I just don't want you to remember this, you know, for our school children. I want you to remember it as a life lesson and for your own children as well. But I'm sure that as you're watching this, some examples ran across your mind, well, maybe I didn't do it the way I should. I do want to say, guys, that When the Chips Are Down is an excellent film, and it really does go over behavior a great deal with your SLD children, and it explains why they behave, and I'm going to share with you some of that information as we go through. But I think that if, you know, your district was able to purchase this and then let everybody see it at one time or another, it would be excellent. Okay, so everybody should see that DVD. Now, I normally don't show clips unless I believe they say things better than I do, and this guy is really excellent. I don't know, do you guys remember Fat City? How difficult can that be? And he gives people, adults, a disability and puts you in a position, you know, where you feel what the children must be going through. So I'm hoping that you can check that out down the line. Now, the other person besides Rick LaVoy that's has a tremendous impact on me has been Harry Long. Does anybody know Harry Long at all? Yeah. And he wrote The First Days of School, which I understand is one of the largest selling educational books, in the nation at this time. And he's been around in Manchester. I got connected with him quite a few years ago because Manchester had him in the First Day of School in a couple of situations. But one of the things that he says that I think is extremely important for disabled children as well as for yourselves is to recognize the whole idea of structured situations. According to the evidence, and you'll hear me use the word evidence as opposed to research, because when you use the word research, it could be one study. When you use the word evidence, it means that there are a number of different research studies that seem to be leaning in this direction. But what they're basically saying is that everybody learns better in structured situations. Everybody. Okay, no matter what. And I even suggest that if you're dealing with parents and they're struggling with their children at home, and you have parent information night, that you encourage parents to run structured situations within the home, and that is defined as equaling procedures and routines, because you now know that a large number of our families have two-parent working families, and they're simply not being trained in their household to the degree that perhaps they should be. And according to a lot of behaviors, poorly trained children come into our school systems kind of out of control. I would like to share one other piece of information, and that is the amount of interaction time that the evidence is saying that parents use with their children on a daily basis. There was a study that was done probably about 6 or 8 years ago that said that we interact with our children basically about 20 minutes per day. Okay, that's really kind of hard to believe, isn't it? Then there was another study, kind of replicated what was going on, that was done about 2 years ago. And they said that we interact with them 12 minutes per day. And then the latest study that came out, and it was actually on TV, and there was some hosts that were talking about this, said that we interact with our children 31 minutes per week. So is there any wonder why sometimes we have children, who are not being trained or educated appropriately prior to coming into our schools? So one of the things that we have to do is we have to have structure. And I would imagine that vocational school teachers, more than others, really understand the whole idea of structure, which is procedures and routines. And procedures and routines have to be practiced over and over and over again so that they can eventually become a what? Habit, okay? And habits are non-thinking behaviors. Now, I want you to think about that poor ADHD kid, okay? And I say ADHD or ADD. ADHD children pay attention to everything in the world. ADD children pay attention to nothing. So you can kind of take a look at it in two different ways. But if you look at that child and you practice your procedures in all of your classrooms over and over and over again, then he knows exactly what he's going to do when he walks into that. And by the way, they suggest that when there is predictability, the children feel safe. Boy, if there's a time in our world where we need our children to feel safe, it is now. I mean, guys, I go back to the Cuban Missile Crisis in grade 6, and I remember them saying, okay, we're going to practice for a nuclear attack. And we would go out into the hallway and cover our heads and crouch down. Can you imagine something as silly as that? But I also remember how I felt about that. And I remember when those ships were going towards Cuba, and nobody knew what the heck was going to go on. Little did we know how close, we did come, to some sort of a nuclear event. But I remember how I felt. Now, just think about this. Children are watching what happened in Connecticut and looking at all these school shootings, and we need to have structure and predictability so they really do feel safe. Extremely, extremely important. So how do you do that? You practice your procedures over and over again, and I would suggest you do these the first day or the first week or the first 2 weeks of school. So by spending some time then, you save so much time down the road. And what I like about this, guys, is you no longer have to be disciplinarian when it comes to this. Joe, how many times do I got to tell you sit in your seat correctly? How many times do I got to tell you don't run in the shop areas? How many times? You don't have to say all of those things and have confrontations anymore. All you do is say, Joe, what's our procedure about running in the classroom? Joe, what's our procedure about sitting in a chair appropriately? You know, guys, what's our procedure about calling out answers? You know, those kinds of things. So, guys, I think that procedures and routines are so important. So let me give you an example, elementary, middle, high. In elementary school, you know what the first day of school is like in first grade. They come with backpacks that look like they have 95 pounds on the back of them. School's just started. I have no idea what's in those backpacks. But you know those kids come tromping in. They're all excited. They don't know what's going on. They're talking, all of this kind of stuff. So you as the teacher in elementary school would want to say, okay, guys, when you walk into our room, you immediately go to where the hangers are. You hang up your coat. You put your backpack down. Okay, then I want you to go to your assigned seats. And by the way, they say effective teachers assign seats the first day of school. I'm not quite sure how that works, you know, in your facilities, but that's what they say. So then you go over, okay, you walk into the room, you go over there, you hang your coat, you come to your seat, and we're going to have a do now, or whatever you all would call it, up on the board, and I want you to get started with that do now the second that you sit down in your seat. Okay, and then what you do is you eventually take attendance, which takes you 2 seconds because you're going to have a seating chart, and it's not going to be long at all. And then you say to those little kids, okay, do you now know how you're supposed to enter this room and do all of this? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, I want you to go up, put your coats on, get your backpacks on, let's go out and stand in the hallway. Okay, and you practice that procedure or routine several times. And I am telling you, down the road, you're going to save yourself so many different amounts of time. Middle school, have you seen what happens when you ask children to pass papers up until the front of the room? What happens? Is it chaotic for the most part? Many times, because what do? Everybody's standing here, you ask them to pass the papers up, everybody turns around. So everybody is now facing that way for those papers to come up. Now, if you're like I was when I was a kid, what are you doing to the girl in front of you? Smacking her in the head, pulling her ponytail, you know, doing all these kind of things. And that's what everybody else is doing. Okay, so Harry Wong, as part of his procedure, recommends that you never pass papers from the back to the front of the room. You pass them from one side to the other. And not only that, he's very specific. He says, I want you to take the paper and put it down on the next person's desk. You take those papers and you put them down on the next. Because what does he not want to happen? You know, that tug of war with the papers when you're giving them, the dropping of the papers or whatever. So he has a procedure for middle school kids to pass papers up. And then the one for high school that I use as an example is nothing more than what happens when the bell rings in your classes right now. What happens in high school when the bell rings, for the most part? What happens? They all get up. They're not listening to a word you're saying. So one of the procedures that I would go over, okay, with the high school kids is, look, guys, that bell is for me. It's really not for you. That's to tell me that I need to finish up, okay, and I'm going to finish up very quickly, and I'm going to get you going, and you can go across campus because I know it takes a lot of time to go through the hallways. Okay, so when the bell rings, I want you to remain seated. Let me say my final words, then I will dismiss you. The bell doesn't dismiss you. Okay, does everybody understand that? You go through the class. Yes, 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 yeah, everybody understands that. First day of school, the bell rings. What happens? And after the kids get up and they're leaving, oh, no. Okay, come back. Sit down. Okay, what's our procedure about when the bell rings in class? We dismiss you. I do. These are just examples. But guys, you, particularly in vocational school, really need to come up with all of your procedures and routines. Practice those procedures and routines over and over again. Let them become habits, non-thinking behaviors, and man, you just get a great deal for those special education students sitting in front of you. Okay, it's predictable, they know what to do. What happens when you don't go over the procedures with an ADHD kid and he comes in, pulling things out of his desk, knocking things off the top of his desk, not sure where his desk is at? You know, you practice those procedures according to Harry Wong to the second Friday of the beginning of the school year, and you're going to save yourself so much time as we go through it. So one of the really important things that Harry Wong is known for is the procedures and routines. Okay, so here's additional information. It's the teacher who makes the difference in the classroom. And I saw a research study, evidence-based, yesterday that says that 43% of what a child does is based on the quality of the teacher. That's pretty interesting, right? And it was just over an email, and then I opened it up, and this just happened yesterday. So it is the teacher, really, guys, who makes the difference in the classroom. Okay, assignments must be posted in the same consistent location every single day. How many people do that? Yeah, a lot of you already do that, right? They should know exactly where it's at. They can't come to you 2 or 3 weeks from now and say, I don't know where it was at. Was it on? No. Have it in the same place every single day. Your very first priority when class gets started is to get students to work, and that is related to your do nows. That you can do it from a number of different perspectives, but when they come into your class and they finally get seated and you get their attendance or whatever the case may be, you need to give them some sort of assignment. Now, in my opinion, this should not be a class procedure routine. This should be a building procedure routine, or possibly a district procedure routine, in your case, all of Pearson County vocational schools. Because when one child goes from one class to another, the procedure routine is the same. When one child goes from one school to another, the procedure and routine is the same. And whatever those procedures and routines are decided upon, what you do, make sure that you follow them. I remember as a high school teacher, if I didn't know the child was chewing gum, I didn't care if the child chewed gum. Okay? But what was the building policy? Not to chew gum. I made a mistake. I should have never done that. In some buildings, and I don't know how it works in yours, you can wear hats. In some buildings, you can't wear hats, or whatever the case may be. If you walk by a child with a hat and don't say anything, and another person walks by with a hat, doesn't say anything, and then finally the person who's doing their job says, remove your hat, please, then that person, by the students, proceeds out to get him, or whatever the case may be. You all need to decide, once you decide what the building procedures or district procedures are, you need to follow them all. And then Harry Long says if you don't have a plan, then you're planning to fail. Okay, so you really do need to have plans, even when it comes to discipline, even when it comes to our procedures and routines. And then the number one problem in the classroom is not discipline. It is the lack of procedures and routines. And again, what do I want to remind you? What's our procedure, please? What's our procedure, please? What's our procedure, please? That's a whole lot different, than having some problems. Now remember, there's a direct correlation between the distance of the teacher and your discipline problems. If I'm over here, the discipline problems are probably going to be over there. Okay? 85 to 95% of all instruction takes place in front of the classroom, which would lead one to believe that you have to move around the classroom, which I know all of you are doing. Okay, so let's take a look at additional Harry Wong. Discipline concerns how students behave, procedures concerns how things are done. An effective teacher manages a classroom, an ineffective teacher disciplines a classroom. Okay, it's the procedures that set up the class for achievement to take place. Procedures, what you want students to do. Routines, what the students do automatically. And they have to be rehearsed. Does that all make sense? I mean, how do you start? You don't start out with a specific behavior management program if these kinds of things are not in place, because these could solve so many of those problems that are even in your IEP. Somewhere in this handout I have, this is not an in-service on IEPs. I know you guys know that you have a legal requirement to implement those things. What I'm suggesting is that, wow, you might not have to pay as much attention, and you can address the needs of these students beyond the IEP by following these procedures and routines. Okay, so the only way you can have responsible students is if you have procedures and routines to which those can be responsible to. Now, how many of you, by show of hands, feel as if you have a good number of procedures and routines in your class? Okay? And how many of you practice those every once in a while because, uh-oh, I'm losing control, okay? And I think we need to go over those. Now, I would say a third of you are putting your hands up. I am certain that most of you do have procedures and routines. You're just not putting your hands up, but just make sure that you do that. Effective teachers do not say, and the rule is, effective teachers say, and what are the procedures, please? Okay, so now, guys, once we get past Harry Wong, this is another program, and it's called TEST, and it's Teacher Expectations and Student Achievement. Okay, and one of the things that I want you to think about, just for a second, I'm going to go back, and I just want a little participation here for a second. I want to know what you believe makes you an effective teacher. What is it that makes you an effective teacher? So somebody give me a hand and say, what makes you good? I ask every graduate's class I ever teach, what makes you good? Go ahead. Okay, being really well aware of the content, without a doubt. Yes? Okay, high expectations for all your students. What else? Okay, consistency and predictability, right? Being good? Yeah, being a good listener. Man, I'll tell you, in a little bit I'm going to go over listening, and I was not good at this as an assistant principal. There's a few things that happened because I was not a good listener. You know, I'm going to tell you, there's this guy, Sam Kerman, who wrote this program, and he said that he realized, you know, that he paid more attention to his dog than he did his spouse when he got home from work. How many of you are dog owners? You guys know what he means? I mean, I'm a dog owner. Yeah, when I walk in the house, what do? I pay attention to the dog, I'm petting the dog's coming up to me and everything else. And your significant other does this, she comes up to you, okay, or he comes up to you, and they say, and they go through the same. And you're all there going, oh yeah, you're like this, you know, and everything. And then the problem is she asks you a question about what she just said to you. Now, here's what I do, okay? It's a little bit of hint to deal with your spouse. I go, I don't know, what do you think? You know, I do something like that because I wasn't listening to a word she was saying. So listening is huge. What else makes you good? See, I want you to look around. Guys, listen to what I'm asking you. What makes you an effective teacher? What makes you good? And you can't tell me. And if there's one thing that I think you all should be able to spout out just like this is what I do that makes me good. Now, this whole project was done in around 73 when it comes to testing, but it was a replicated study. And it's one of those kinds of things that never goes out in date. So I'm just going to share a few of these general things that you can do in class that may solve so many of your problems. And the first one that you see up there, by the way, it was out of the Los Angeles County School District, okay? And what they did was they sat around one day, and Nancy knows what I'm talking about, any other administrator. You know how you just have one of those days that blows you away? And you're sitting there with your colleagues thinking, okay, what is it that we can do to make things better around here and all of that? And they said, you know what? There are certain things that people who have mastered the craft of teaching, there's certain things that they do, okay, that stops discipline problems from recurring. It increases attendance and those kind of things. So what they did was they wrote a grant. They ended up getting a grant. They visited hundreds and hundreds of school classes throughout the nation. They tried to identify them and said, what is it that those master teachers are doing? And then we can share it with everybody else in an attempt to try to have them become master teachers as well. So what I am hoping is that as I go through some of these things, you do these things. So at times, I'm hoping to confirm some of the things that you're doing to make you feel better. Because I remember one time I did a central regional thing, and at the end, one guy says, oh, this is ridiculous, you know, if we don't know this information. No, he missed the point. What I was trying to do was confirm some of the things they're doing to make them feel really good and understand what they are as far as being a master teacher. So the first one up here is equitable distribution of response opportunities. Guys, and all that means is getting everybody actively involved in your class, calling on all of your students. Okay, because everybody says they call on all their students, and it's simply not true. I have been in classrooms of 30, you know, in a health class, and I went to the teacher later on, and what I do is I do slash marks. I put a circle down for every kid in the classroom. Every time you're given an opportunity to respond, I put a slash on. And by the way, most of the slashes take place, multiple slashes in the front of the classroom, and most take place at the base of the T. And then in the wings, there's not a whole lot of those slashes that are going on. Okay, but I can show the teachers that you're not calling on everybody. And I don't have a problem with not calling on everybody, but I do have a problem if they're calling on one person, 2 people, or 3 people, 3 or 4 or 5 times, and some kids not at all. So I would say to them, why aren't you calling on them? And they say, because I don't want to embarrass the child. I know he doesn't know the answer. My goodness, guys, if we took that approach, you know, then we would have loads more kids not learning how to read or do their academics. So what you need to do is you need in your head to be a skilled observer and know who's participating in class. And at the beginning of the year, here's my procedure. Guys, I need to acknowledge you before you give me an answer. I need to acknowledge you before you give me an answer. What that means is don't call out answers. Because do you guys know what the average amount of time a teacher waits until an answer is given before it's shouted out? Do you know what the average amount of time is? It's a max of 2.5 seconds. And normally it's less than that. And the problem is our kids that we're talking about don't even have enough time to think about an appropriate answer. It takes our children, our special education students, our SLB children, longer to process a question, okay, than other children. So if you just have high-achieving students calling out answers just like that, they never have an opportunity, okay, to think about an appropriate answer. And who's participating? Usually it's just the high-achieving students. So my procedure for Harry Wong is, look, I need to acknowledge you before you give me an answer. And I may call on you whether you have your hand up or not. So you've got to get that kid thinking, oh my gosh, my teacher may be calling me at any given time. By the way, I was in first, second, and third grade, the kid who sat in the back of the classroom and never participated. We didn't really pay attention to anything. You know, I came from a blue-collar family, you know, they were, you know, street workers, electricians, and all of this. They really weren't into the academic scene, and my parents didn't have a problem telling me that, because they would turn around and say, well, you know, I'm an electrician, but I make 3 times the amount of money that that teacher's making over there, you know, those kinds of things. So equitable distribution of response opportunities means make sure you call on everybody, and make sure that you're calling on them equitably. Sounds ridiculous, but we don't do it based on what the evidence shows. Okay, so then we finally call on a child. And what can happen when you call on children? There's just a couple of things. They what? They either answer it appropriately or they don't know the answer. If they answer it appropriately, what are we going to do? We're going to praise that child for answering appropriately. But more importantly, I think you should tell them why you're praising them. If a little girl is doing a piece of artwork in your class, okay, and you go up and you say, oh, that's a nice picture. Does that mean a whole lot to that particular person? Oh, my teacher likes my picture. But if I go up to that child and I say, you know what? I love the way you shaded those blues and grays to come up with those clouds. They are awesome. What do you suppose that child's going to do from that point forward? She's going to shade those blues and grays to come up with those awesome clouds. I want you to realize when you give reasons for praise, they're going to tend to repeat it. So let me give you an example of a dilemma I had. I went into a classroom and I was observing a middle school teacher. 85% to 95% of the instruction was taking place in the front of that classroom. Okay, so in the front of the classroom, if you let children see themselves, are usually the high-achieving students, so he's spending most of his time by those students. I did notice that about mid-lesson, he left the front of the classroom and he used what we consider proximity. And he walked over, and when he got next to the child, it was very effective because all of a sudden the child that wasn't working is working. Goes to another child that was talking when he was speaking. You know, when he stood next to that child, they stopped speaking. So he only did this one time, but I had to write his evaluation. Now, under normal circumstances, administrators, what would we do? We would say that one of your weaknesses and one thing that you have to improve upon is the utilization of proximity. I chose not to do that. I chose to say in this evaluation that when you used proximity, it was a very effective strategy. Okay? And I gave him reasons why. So what do you suppose from that day forward, every single time I went into that classroom, what do you think was happening? He was using his proximity. Even though it was a weakness, okay, but I chose to not recognize it as a weakness because I know what we all do. When you do your evaluations, you all look down, you see no weakness at all. Take a deep breath and you go back up and then you relax and check it out. Okay, so equitable distribution, then we go to latency. Latency is the fact that we only wait 2.5 seconds before a child gives us a response. Now think of our disabled children. It takes longer to process the question. How much time do you believe we should be waiting, okay, before we ask the child for a response? Any idea? Pardon? Okay, 5 seconds. How many agree with 5 seconds? Anybody think more? Okay, it's 5 to 7 seconds. Now, I've had people actually say to me 10 seconds, 15 seconds. I'm going, oh, really? Think about it. Okay, guys, give me some answers. Give me some reasons why we fought the Civil War. Can you imagine going to 10, 15, 20 seconds, and then they kind of laugh at themselves and go, oh my God, you can't do that. Okay, so it is 5 to 7 seconds, but here's what I want you to do. If you're involved in a situation in your classrooms tomorrow, okay, I want you to do that. I want you to wait a little bit more time. And what do you suppose I think you're going to see? that if we wait 5 to 7 seconds as opposed to letting a child call out an answer, what are we going to begin to see in class? More children what? More children raising their hands, and perhaps some of those children who never participate will raise their hands. Okay, here's one thing that you'll even see with the SLD child. And you'll go ahead and ask a second question because somebody already answered the first question. Then all of a sudden there's this SLD child in there and you ask him the question. And he answers the first question because he was still processing the first question, not the second one that was going on. So what I think you may see is that the longer that you wait, that 5 to 7 seconds, the more hands you'll see go up, and perhaps that will put you in a position where you can ask that child a question and they never participate in class. Then you can go around and you can say, good job, exactly, that's what I was looking for, praising and giving reasons for praise. What is the second thing that can happen? Okay, they know the answer, right? The second thing is they don't know the answer. Now this is where, if you develop this skill, I believe you are on your way to becoming a master teacher. And that is delving, rephrasing, and giving clues. In other words, what you need to do is delve, rephrase, give clues in an effort to get that child to come up with an appropriate response. And exactly, that's what I was looking for. And I love the way you looked at this picture and realized that he was president during the Civil War, and you can give him reasons for praise as well. Guys, these are general things. You see, you have to understand that our kids come into these classes, okay, feeling as if they don't belong. Have you guys ever been in a class where you felt you didn't belong? Man, I tell you, I was in a physics class one time, and I'm looking around, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, where am I? I don't know the answers to any of this, and all of these people are answering the question. I didn't feel as if I belonged in that class. Now, when you don't feel as if you don't belong in the class, you tend to lose hope. And then you tend not to participate. So what you have to understand is that if you can get these children actively involved, and you can do that through delving, rephrasing, and giving clues, and the use of praise, then there's going to be a much greater chance that they're going to participate in your class. It's just a general strategy, but it affects our special education students tremendously. Affirmation and correction. What that is make sure you're affirming or correcting the child. There's so many people out there that believe, oh, you can't correct a special ed because then you're going to make yourself people. No, it's not what you say to these kids about either affirming or correcting. It's not what you say. What is it? How you say what you say. So if you're standing up there and the kid gives you an off-the-wall answer, by the way, I have gotten the most god-awful answers in graduate school situations. And you know, I'm going to go over this a little bit, but in order to control the behavior of others, whose behavior do you first have to control? Your own. So rather than me going, oh my God, you know, or slapping my hand and saying, how many times do we have to go over this? Like we all have done at one time or another to our students. If I did that to my graduate school class, what would happen? They wouldn't want to be in there for a second. They would want to get the heck out of there, and they would not like my class. Okay, so guys, when they come up with some of these answers, you just affirm or correct. It's not what you say, it's how you say what you say. No, that's not correct. Can somebody else help them, or whatever the case may be? But think about it, guys. If you're delving, rephrasing, and giving clues appropriately, and can always get a child to come up with an appropriate response, man, they're going to love you. Because what are they going to think? They're going to think, wow, my teacher cares about me. By the way, the research evidence out there is that if children believe that you like them, they will do better. Okay, because I have seen, and I pick on science teachers, so forgive me, but I have seen situations, I'm not here to be nice, I'm here to teach science. You know, one of those kind of things. I'm not here to be liked, you know? No. You know, the evidence shows us that if the students believe that you like them, and sometimes, guys, I know that is difficult to like some of these kids, you know, then they will do better. And then, of course, let me go back to proximity because this is a behavior management strategy as well. And I love it. Now, guys, this is what's in my head, my crazy head. All of this stuff. Okay, I want you down the road, okay, to kind of be able to tell me what it is that makes you good. Okay, because right now you couldn't tell me what makes you good. Okay, I make sure if you go on an interview down the road, if you have new teachers, if you have student teachers, man, hone in on this stuff. Now, I want to make sure that no child's left behind. I want to make sure that every single child in my class has an equal opportunity to participate. I want to make sure that I give every single child in my classroom enough time to think about an appropriate answer. And if they don't come up with it, I will move on, okay? Or I will delve, rephrase, give clues to try to get them to come up with an appropriate response. And if they don't, then we have praise and reasons for praise. Guys, you can use that right there to get a job. And it's happened. That's the reason why I'm sharing it. I get this frantic call one night from Georgia Court. I knew this one student was going for a job. He was so nervous about it. I said, "Use your test strategies as your philosophy." What is your philosophy? That every single child that walks in front of you is going to learn. How are you going to do that? I'm going to make sure that I give them enough time to think about an appropriate answer. What else are you going to do? Well, if they don't know the answer, I'm going to tell them, rephrase, and give clues so that they can come up with an answer. Guys, I'm telling you, if you begin to implement these kinds of strategies, those children are going to identify all of you who do this as their favorite teacher. And the parent's going to come in and say, "Man, I don't know what you're doing this year, but those people, my child wants to get up and go to school in the morning. He's attending to a much greater degree. He has fewer behavior problems," and that's exactly what the study of these programs has said. So here's proximity. So somebody is talking in the crowd. So I simply walk over, don't make a big deal out of it, and I end up standing next to that particular person. Okay, so I go stand next to the person, and usually that's defined as one room away from the person. So when I stand here, if this child is talking, most of the time I don't even have to say, "Please stop talking," do I? What do? They stop talking. Well, what's interesting is you go like this, you walk over here, they start talking again. You walk back over here, they stop talking. By the way, are you guys good at the evil eye? Yeah, I'll bet you all are, right? The evil eye does work, okay? It does work. It stops the behavior, doesn't it? What does it not do? It doesn't change the behavior. See, guys, I want you all to understand as we get into behavior, punishment stops behavior, okay? But it doesn't change behavior. So let's just say with the evil eye. So I look at this person, I give them the evil eye, and after I give them the evil eye, I might do this or point to the paper to do their work or whatever. But what I will always do at the end of class before they leave, I'll say, "Hey, did you notice that I looked at you? What were you doing?" "Oh, I was talking." "Yes." Please don't talk, when I am speaking. That's how you begin to change behaviors. It's almost self-regulatory behavior. The other thing is that, there are some studies that say 35% of our class time is related to correcting behaviors. Guys, if you're using proximity, you don't have to do that. You simply walk over, stand next, tell the child this, and get to work, or you're looking up there, because we have, PowerPoints now, we have whatever you're using, a graphic organizer or something, you can walk around and touch them. But it is so much fun to teach if you know this stuff. Because again, in my wacky head, I'm like, okay, we did not call it. Okay, I'm talking to myself. Okay. And, so I walk over here, and then I call on somebody, and then, that was a horrible way to say, let me help him rephrase and give clues. So now I'm helping him rephrase and give clues. He comes up with the appropriate response, and in my head I'm like, yes, this stuff works. I go over to proximity. By the way, I am not an angel, okay? Because what I may be thinking in my head is something like this. I'm going to get that little bastard. Okay? I might be thinking he's driving me back there crazy, and I'm going to get it. But I don't. Because what do I have to do? I have to remain in control of myself, very nicely, walk over, stand next to him. He stops the behavior. If I follow up and talk to him on why I came over there and stopped this behavior, it works. By the way, this really works. One time I went to Atlantic City Conference, and they were doing a program on testing. So my partner and I thought, let's go down here and find out if we can learn some additional information. Because at that time, I wasn't saying how good am I compared to how good I could be. So he had his handouts color-coded. And I remember as an adult sitting here, I was way ahead of him. He was doing this presentation, but I knew so much about Tesla, I really wasn't paying much attention. All of a sudden, I start seeing him walk towards me. Now here I am, I'm probably 40-some years old, and I'm going, oh, please God, I don't want to go around. I'm like this little kid, right? And sure enough, this guy comes up, and what he does is he sees where I'm at. One page at a time, one color at a time, he changes my paper. Do you think I ever got off task again from that paper? So this stuff really does work. So guys, these are the main ones. There's actually 15 of them, but those are the main ones. See, my point is if you use these general methodologies and strategies, perhaps all of the teachers over the years use those general methodologies and strategies, maybe that child wouldn't have even been identified as being a special education child. Okay, because he would have been actively involved in that class. Okay, so let's go to just the others, and I just want to share them. There's a general theme to this. We tend to do this with our high achievers as opposed to our low achieving students. Okay, so if you look at the next one, I always say, who gets the most individual help? Who gets the most individual help? You know what it is? It's not the low achieving students. Everybody says, oh, low achieving students get most of the individual help. No, it's not. It's the high achieving students. Do you know why? Oh my God. That not only do they ask, they demand it. Have you ever not called on a high achieving student and he had his hand up? Or she had her hand up? What happens? They start out like this. You know, and it's like this. Then the next thing you know, they're getting aggressive. One time, we took 25 teachers in to watch all 15 behaviors, and the teacher was not calling on the child, who was the high achiever. The child jumps out of his chair, slaps his hands together right in front of her face because he couldn't stand it anymore. So they get most of the individual help. By the way, a lot of our people say, hey, it's not fair to all of the other students, you know, to give so much attention to this low-achieving student. That's absolutely crazy. You know, fairness is based on need. If that child needs 2 minutes of your time, you give them 2 minutes. If that high-achieving student needs 30 seconds of your time, you give them 30 seconds. It's all based on need. Courtesy. Who are we more courteous to? Okay, one example of that. I'm not going to give examples on all of this, but one time I walked out as assistant principal at high school. The bell rang, the hallways were clearing. They finally cleared and we have a hall duty teacher down at the end of the hall. Now here's the hall, here's this child, here's the class he was going through. She could not see me. Okay, so what's this child do? He drops a book off the top of a stack of books. Now you guys know these kids as well as I do. Now that kid had to get to that door over there. He's got a stack of books in his hand. There's a book down here. What did he do to get to that door? Come on, here he goes. He's kicking the books. You know, all the way across. And you know, it's so typical, right? And the teacher yells from all the way down the hall, hey, stop kicking the book. You know, he says, well, I got to get to Mr. Jones's place. I said stop kicking the book. And she's found, and she's on his case coming down the hall. And in the reality of the case was the kid ends up giving her the finger. I'm out there. Now, who do I have to... Can I permit a kid that gave the teacher a finger to get off? No. You can't administer it because you got to have consistency. So I actually had to suspend this child because he used some verbalizations along with that finger as well. Okay, but who did I also have to speak with? The teacher, for goodness sakes. Please, guys, tell me what we should have done there. The teacher walks down the hall, picks up the book. Whose class are you going to? I'm going to Mr. Jones's class. Take that child over to Mr. Jones's class. Mr. Jones, he was really trying to be on time, and he had a whole stack of books. Please don't mark him late. Now, here's the reality of the story. About 30 years later, because I am old, 30 years later, this kid comes up to me and says, Mr. Locuson, you remember when I got suspended for giving the teacher and all of that thing? He remembered that 30 years later. My question is, if that teacher went the other direction and helped that child get out of the late to class and everything else, do you think that child would probably remember? See, kids tend to remember the good things and the bad things that happen to them. Personal interest in regards. Listening, I told you about, as far as paying more attention to his dog than he did his spouse. Touching, oh man, that's tough these days. This still is a methodology and strategy that master teachers use, but goodness gracious, my superintendents are don't tell them that they should touch kids and all of that. So of course you touch kids appropriately. High five, shaking their hands, and all of those kind of kids. Middle school, high school, you don't pat a girl on the back and all of that. But what they said is effective teachers and master teachers touch their students appropriately. Okay? That you stick with whatever your policy is within your district, because I don't want to be responsible for you being released next week from your job. Higher level questioning techniques. What kinds of questions do we tend to ask our low achieving students? Most people say lower level questions. Guys, lower level questions are recall knowledge. Oh my gosh, I hated those kind of questions when I was a kid. If you're asked what the date was, or very specifics of an event, that's difficult. Who do you always count on for those kind of questions? The high achieving students. So the general rule of thumb is that you should ask higher level questions to all of your students, explain, critique, analyze, all of that kind of stuff. And you can always count on your high achieving students to answer lower level questions, okay? Quickly, accepting feelings. Oh my gosh, have you ever been in class and it started to snow? What happened when it started to snow? Okay, chaos. Okay, chaos. And the teachers they're pretty angry. They pull their shades down. Sometimes, we got to get some work done and all of those kind of things, right? But then when I watch that, here's what I see the teachers doing. They start edging over to the door. The kids are all busy. What do you suppose that teacher wants to know? Oh, man, are those buses lining up? We're going to get out early. In other words, they're just as excited about getting out of school as the kids, but they get all over the kids. What do you say to the kids? Oh, guys, everybody know what the weather report is today? Let's take a look out here. Okay, we'll keep an eye on it. Look, guys, we've got about 10 minutes more of math we have to get done. We've got 10 more minutes to work on this project. We've got to get it done. I promise you. Let's get that done, and then we'll check out the weather and see what's going on. All you're doing is accepting their feelings. You do realize that kids have these really warped opinions of teachers. Have you guys ever been in a mall with shorts on? What happens? It's like, oh my God, Mr. Lopez, you walk out of the bathroom in an elementary school. They're looking at you like, the guy goes to the bathroom. And here's what used to happen to me. I never go to Ocean County Mall. I went one time. I was with my family. I was an assistant principal and, you suspend kids and everything else. So here's what I heard walking down Ocean County Mall with my family. Fuck you, officer! I go to Woodbridge Mall, I go to Newtown Mall, I don't go to Ocean County Mall. Maybe that's what happened to you, right? Okay, so the only other one up here was personal interest and regards. I just want to share that really briefly with you because this is important. We used to have these tests and services, and we would have a month in between going over 3 of the behaviors. We said to the group of people, please experiment with this and see what happens. Personal interest and regards is nothing more than trying to find out something more individually about the child and maybe connecting with the child to see if it makes a difference in his life. And we would have a meeting a month later. So we had this one child who used to come from Lakers. We were receiving school, high school from the kids from Lakers. And he would come late every single day out of this one door. And this one particular person who eventually became the administrator himself would go up and say, hey, how come you're late every single day? I'm going to keep an eye on you. You need to get here on time and then. So we just started establishing some sort of a relationship. He'd come in and his hair would be all messed up, and at that time black leather jackets worn in, and it smelled like smoke and the whole bit. And he says, how do you expect to get a date with the ladies if they're coming to school with your hair and all that stuff? Okay, then all of a sudden it was November, and the first 2 weeks he wasn't in school at all. So what happens usually in the first couple of weeks of November? Hunting season. That didn't make us feel real good, guys, because now we know this guy's got a gun, right? So anyway, he hooked that kid up with a science teacher of ours, and they were talking about, maintaining the numbers of deers, and what they did to crops. And the next thing you know, he became this child's mentor. And, this is the kid who originally would go into the cafeteria and sit with the heavy metal guys. As the heavy metal guys, if you've ever looked, they don't have any entrance requirements, for the group in the cafeteria. So what would happen, he would always sit with those guys. But eventually what was going on is he started to sit with other people. He started to make friends. Now, the end of the story is it's kind of funny to me, but it wasn't funny to the teacher. Because what do you suppose happened? Every time I saw that teacher, what did I say? I saw that kid next to him. So I remember walking down the hall, all happy-go-lucky one morning in school, and this particular teacher was standing there looking at me with a nasty look. The kid was hooked in his hip, and I'd never forget it because he goes to me, he's looking at me, he's like, you son of a, look what you've done to me, type of thing, and I just like, oh, hey, have a nice day. And I took off that way. But I've got to tell you guys, he made a tremendous difference in the life of that child. See, nobody ever paid any attention to him. His parents didn't even pay attention to him. So he, for the first time, paid attention to this child. This is the child that you knew the day he turned 16 what was going to happen. He was going to leave school. Okay, this kid ended up graduating, ended up having a great experience, and it was nothing other than us suggesting to experiment with that particular thing. So guys, I want to tell you when we're talking about the SLD children, who they are. Okay, numbers and percentages. If you take a circle and you cut that circle in half, these are all the disabled children in our schools. Okay, you cut it in half. 50% of all of those children are SLD children. The other 50% are all of the other disabilities. Oh, SLD, specific learning disabilities. I'm sorry, we get hooked up with these acronyms, right? So there are 50% are SLD. Now, I looked at the state statistics the other day, and they kind of go against that. Because New Jersey last year had 36% of all disabled children as SLD children. So, what's SLD? All that means is that they have average or above intelligence. I hope you know that. The second that you talk about a learning disabled child. Average or above intelligence. What is the median intelligence IQ? What is the median? 100. One standard deviation above that is 115. One standard deviation below that is 85. So 85 to 115 are the children that we're talking about when it comes to SLD. Okay, so the second that you hear learning disability, you should think, wow, average IQ or better. Well then, how are they identified? There's a discrepancy between their IQ and their performance level, or their education level. There's that discrepancy. They're performing very poorly. So some places use 1 standard deviation, some use 1.5, some use 2. But that's how they are identified as a specific learner. Now here's what's really curious about special ed. I am into slow learning children as well. Those are the ones I really worry about because I don't know if they're getting any kind of services that they should. If you have a 71 IQ, you don't qualify for services as a mild cognitive impaired child. If you have a 70, you do. So if you get a 70 IQ, you qualify. If you get a 71 IQ, you don't. Now, things aren't all bad because these days, what do we have to deal with the needs of all children? What is that animal out there that we didn't use? INRS? You guys heard of INRS? Okay, so that is an action plan. So that means we can develop an action plan through an INRS program for those slow learning children. However, a child with 115 IQ, because he's not performing very well, is identified as a specific learning disabled child. So I want you to realize that those children, and by the way, they suggest that 10% of all children sitting in any classroom is an SLD child. Okay? So we've got to find out, good gracious, what are some of those characteristics or the profiles of those SLD children, because you're going to be dealing with them. Okay, mild cognitive, 7. Developmentally, intellectually disabled, the old, retarded word, change to developmentally disabled, change to intellectually disabled. Now what's interesting is we're going to talk about dyslexia in a little while, and they say all special ed teachers need to be certified, you need to go through 2 hours of training every year, et cetera, when it comes to dyslexia. But the reality is that those special education children are cognitively impaired. They're not SLD, they don't have average or above intelligence, and it's not dyslexia. It's more of a severe reading disability. And then, of course, I talk a little bit about behaviorally disabled, which I'm going to kind of get into in a second. So, I'm watching, I gotta be here, I was watching that time. Okay, so, most of you, this is not a workshop on an IEP. I wanted to say that because I know that most of the time when I do workshops on IEPs, it's like click. A lot of people don't pay too much attention to it. But you all know that legally you all have the obligation to implement what's in that IEP. My recommendation is this. If you have parent meetings, and I'm sure you do, right? Okay, make sure when those parents come in, you pull out that IEP if you have a hard copy. Scratch and draw on it. Use it as a working document. Pull it out. Because what parents want to know is, do you know the methodologies and strategies that are being recommended in that IEP? One way that you can protect yourself is to pull that thing out and make sure she knows that you know what those accommodations and modifications are and supplementary aids and services. Okay, so guys, what's really important here are what are some of the characteristics and the profiles of a learning disabled child. When you look at successive approximations, don't expect that when you teach it one time, the child's going to know the information. It doesn't happen. What you're looking for is direction, not perfection. Okay? It's not going to be perfected. There are always going to be SLD children, learning disabled children. But what you want to see is children moving in the correct direction. Okay? So you're looking for direction, not perfection. They can only do one cognitive thing at a time. Okay? One cognitive thing. So think about it. You have a child that's sitting here listening to a lecture and taking notes. Guys, it's not going to happen. You wonder why these kids can't do it. It's part of that SLD profile. They can't do it. So you've got to come up with potential ways of addressing that situation. One very expensive, cheap way is this little booklet here. You have a person who can take notes well, okay, and you put this flap through. The person writes the notes down, they rip their notes out, and then there is a copy of the notes for the SLD child. These are not that expensive, but they're worth $1 million, you know? These days with technology, there are a number of other things as well. So, it's like this. When you're driving a car, and this is what Rick LaVoy uses as an example. When you're driving a car, you're watching the road, okay? You might be listening to the radio with the kids, and you're communicating with the kids and everything else. What happens when the weather gets really bad? All of a sudden, it starts pouring down. You know? So what do they say to the kids? Okay? Yeah. It's funny because one person in Rick LaVoy's tape yelled out, "Shut up!" Rick LaVoy goes, "We don't say shut up." And actually, that's what we do say. You know, all of a sudden, we're telling them to be quiet so that we can pay attention to what's going on. Because we can only do one cognitive thing under those circumstances at a time. I want you to know that those learning disabled children can't do more than one cognitive thing at a time. So you've got to come up with some sort of strategies to address that. It takes our children longer to process the question. I've already shared that with you. Sometimes it takes quite a while for them to process a question. So when you're asking the question, oh my goodness, you see this SLD child that's raising their hand, man, I'd jump on that. Okay? However, let's just say they don't. And then you're asking another question. Somewhere down the line, you see that child raise their hand, jump on that. Now, sometimes you can make deals with a kid where you'll say, listen, I'll never embarrass you, I'll never ask you a question because I know how uncomfortable you are, unless I am standing directly in front of you. And if I come up and I'm standing directly in front of you, expect a question, pay specific attention, you know, to what is happening. Performance inconsistencies. My goodness, guys, we misuse this tremendously because what happens is that they're in your classroom, you see him doing it. Okay, you see him doing it again. He's performing very well. He goes home without you being around and he can't do it. He comes in the next day and you're all over him because you know he can do that. Okay, and you can't understand why he's not doing his homework. Guys, the profile of the SLD child is there are performance inconsistencies. So Rick LaVoy says, rather than celebrating the fact that this child finally is getting some things right, we get all over his case and say, oh, you're dogging it. I know you did it in class. Part of the SLD child is performance inconsistency. If you learn nothing more than that today, that is a huge piece of this children. They have visual perceptual problems, which I think most of you probably know as a result of being in vocational school. They have a problem finding words. They eventually find the word. When they pull it out of the brain, they can't put it back into the brain in the right spot. So sometimes they think they know it. By the way, that's happening to me more and more. I don't know about you guys. So maybe I have dystonia as well. So it's a storage and retrieval problem, and it takes notes and listening. Taking notes and listening at the same time is very difficult. So here's what I'm going to do. I've got to do a good part of this. I want to explain. You have a handout that's on dyslexia. That handout is really a self-explanatory handout, okay? But we're going to go over that shortly anyway, some of the information that's in there. When you come back, how long do they have? 15 minutes. When you come back in 15 minutes, I'm going to continue a little bit because I definitely want to get into the behavioral part of this in crisis, okay? Then we'll get into dyslexia. Okay, thanks for your attention so far. See you in 15 minutes. I'm going to just show you a couple of the PowerPoint pages that you have, but I understand I have until 10:45, which means 10:44, so I can make 0. Then I think you have another 40-minute break. No, I mean another 15-minute break before your 11 o'clock thing is going on. So I want to ask you a question before I get to this. Do you all think that inequality is inevitable? Is inequality inevitable? Okay, some people are saying yes. I kind of believe that myself, because if you think of nothing more than IQ, okay, and you know, you now know 85 to 115 is an average IQ. Well, there's a whole lot of people on that bell-shaped curve, okay, that are not average or better. So obviously, based on your intellectual capacity, you know, inequality is inevitable. So if that is the case, then what on earth is our job? Our job is to make sure that we give every single student an equal opportunity to succeed, despite the challenges that they face, because inequality technically is inevitable. I did have a couple of frames up here that I'm not really going to go into, but you can see the examples of ADD and ADHD, and it's comorbid with a lot of the disabilities, not just SLD or specific learning disabled children. And examples of that, and I know you all know this because probably half of us have some of these characteristics. Okay, disorganization, difficulty getting started and finishing work, forgetting assignments, procrastination on long-term assignments, and forgetting to turn in assignments. These are among some of the children that we have where there is comorbid problems that go along with other disabilities. Now, I have to tell you that if you get on Amazon, these days technology and items that are available, you can get on Amazon, and there is a book that's titled Teenagers with ADD and ADHD, and it's got some fantastic methodologies and strategies and tells you under what circumstances to use this. And you can pick these books up that are out of date for like $3, you know, so if you ever want to do something like really into ADHD, I think you should. And then, I went backwards. So here's the other aspect of that, difficulty memorizing or later quickly recalling facts. And it is a strategy to use a repetition and redundancy, you know, with our children, and you shouldn't feel guilty about that. And then obviously those children have difficulty controlling their emotions, which is going to lead us, you know, into the behavior part of this. And they do have problems socializing with friends. And if there's one thing that really makes me sad, is that when I meet with the special ed parent advisory committee people, they always tell me how their children have no friends. They're never invited to birthday parties, you know, they don't go out. And you can sit there and you listen to these people and really get depressed. So one of those things that I encourage all buildings, and my buildings all have it, is this philosophy of a circle of friends, where you end up hooking up kids to other kids that are non-disabled. Where non-disabled high school kids go into my classes that are multiply disabled. Where they have a peer-to-peer program at one of the elementary schools. And it's almost like we're requesting that some of these children, you know, will volunteer to spend some time with our disabled children. But ultimately, if you're going to be dealing with ADD and ADHD, structure equals procedures and routines that will help, repetition and redundancy, and of course what Harry Wong says constantly, no matter what I tell you here, you can listen to me all day long, you can think even some of these things are good ideas, but if you don't implement it, it's not going to do anything, so implementation is the key to success. So, you know, if I'm suggesting some here so you think they're a good idea, please implement it. And then what I'm asking the administrators is when they go in here and they're evaluating you, you can take a look at this. Now, which one are you guys using Danielson, or are you on something totally different? We're finding that almost all of the evaluation systems in one way or another do coincide with the information that I'm sharing. Okay? The other thing that I want to mention is that we also have a program in our district called PESA, and it's Parent Expectations Support Achievement. And the whole idea of the program is trying to teach them how to spend individual time with each of the children. And I remember one lady raised her hand, I have 5 children, I work full-time, my husband works full-time. How on earth would you expect me to give each of my children individual time? What we're saying is that the evidence suggests that it is very valuable to give every single child individual time. And I'll give you a quick example of myself. I am a motorcycle enthusiast. I've been cross-country up and down, you know, put on 70,000 miles on the motorcycles and things like that. I can't leave the house with my motorcycle if my daughter is around. And that's when my daughter and I spend individual time, is when we're riding that darn motorcycle. You know, you would think who would be on that? My son, My son's individual time is more like going to games, watching games together, stats, all of those different kinds of things. But the suggestion is through PESA, which is supported by TESA, to do everything possible to be individual time for each of your children. So now we want to get into behavior a little bit. And well, I'm going to spend a little bit more time with this, but with that dyslexia handout that I gave, we're definitely going to get to it, but we probably won't get through the whole thing. But that dyslexia handout is very, very specific, and you can read that yourself and kind of implement. However, we will get to that. So I want to ask a question. How do you see children in your school systems misbehaving? What are they doing? Shout outs and things. What are they doing? Cell phones? What else? Tweeting? I'm sorry? Okay, the way they dress. Yeah, without a doubt. What else? How are they misbehaving in your classes? What do you say? Okay, refusal. Refusing to do work. What else? Okay, talking. What else? Okay, they're late. Whining. Yes. Yes, what is it? Okay, sleeping. So these are all different ways that you see children misbehaving. The reality is you got a great deal of them. You didn't get the moral part. Okay, we're stealing. I don't know if that takes place in many of your schools, but it's kind of interesting, and that's one. And then the aggressiveness of hitting each other, fights, or whatever the case may be. Those are some of the ways children misbehave. Now, if I were to say, why are they misbehaving? Just give me 2 or 3 things. Anybody shout out. Why do they misbehave? Attention-seeking behaviors is the #1 answer. They do it to get your attention. Guys, the object of TESA is to give them attention when they're doing something right, as opposed to giving them attention when they're doing something wrong. Because you know your kids. They would rather be perceived as being bad as opposed to being dumb. Is that correct? So, all of a sudden, they're doing some work and they're not very good at it. Man, they begin to act out. In one of the examples I use in regional day school, I asked the people to baseline the information on this child. We couldn't figure out why. He was a tough one. Okay? So what happened was that every day at about 10:45, we saw that he was acting out. What do you think were among the possibilities? Every day at the same time acting out. That's what the benefit of baselining is, by the way. What do you think could have been? Yeah, some people say meds, and by the way, parents don't think you need to get medication over the weekend because they have no restrictions, therefore the medication is not needed. What they don't realize is that when they start getting it on Monday morning, it doesn't get in until Thursday, so we're running into a few problems there. What are other reasons why they misbehave? Okay, could be hungry, lunchtime, yeah. In this particular case, guys, we found out it was math. Okay, every time this child did math, he felt so horribly about himself. What did he want to do? He wanted to get out of there, so he acted up. What was interesting though was when he acted up, we would put him in timeout. We have a crisis aid, we have two-way class, we have all of that stuff set up for physically acting out children primarily. But he would go in there. Now most of the time when we go in there and the crisis aid is looking and taking notes, within 10 minutes that child should be back into class. See, what we don't want to do is we don't want to encourage that kind of behavior. We don't want to reinforce undesirable behaviors, right? So we get him right back into class. But in this particular case, we noticed that he acted out about 30 minutes. So that's what was part of us finding out it was math. So all we had to do is get him at an instructional level. Okay? It was over-challenging for him. So if it was over-challenging, he wasn't doing what he needed to do. We had to, that by the way, is usually something like when you're getting 70s and below. Appropriately challenging is when you're scoring somewhere about 75 to 85. And if they were mastering something at 95, and by the way, some kids who are mastering things like that as well, because the information is boring, So these are some of the reasons why. So here's what I want to ask you, the last question. Why did you behave as a child?
Yeah.
What was that?
My mom would have killed me.
Yeah, my mom would have killed me. #1 answer, fear. Okay, that's why I behaved as a child, okay? Until I later thought about it, and I didn't know. Because, my father was one that would rip his belt off and go outside, like the football player just got, in trouble for it, take the broad, whack me in the back of the legs. See, we had to do that one time, by the way. I don't know about you guys. Once they did it one time, we didn't want to have anything to do. So of course, we never want to act that way. By the way, what I didn't mention, we want to try to eliminate sarcasm from our vocabulary. Sometimes our children don't understand sarcasm. What's other reasons why we behave? A couple more.
We want to.
Expectations? Good. Okay, and then there's some children who just want to be, I behaved because I didn't want to disappoint my parents. The interesting thing is now these days, there's a lot of kids who don't care if they disappoint their parents or not. I don't know if you've noticed that. But I behaved because I really simply didn't want to disappoint them. And I knew that if I got in trouble in school, what happened when I got home? Man, I got in big time trouble when I got home, you know? These days, it's not like that. You get in trouble at school, and the parents are asking you what you did to put their child in a position where they called you an asshole. You know what I mean? It's like you got to explain everything that you're doing, you know, that kind of thing. So, let me ask you this. Is there any one behavior management program that you think is going to solve all problems? Absolutely not. You have to understand this. That's a very important piece. If you come up with one, but you know, because it's not $1 million idea, it's $1 billion idea. When you get a hold of those kinds of things. So the behavior skills that I just think that you need to know, in general, is that you must be a skilled observer. You must know what's going on in your class at all times. Okay, so you have to be a skilled observer. You can't do procedures and routines. You can't do tests and procedures and all of those kind of things unless you really know what's going on. Like, did I call on? Did I not call on? Who's acting out? Okay, who's speaking when I'm speaking? You need to really be a skilled observer and know what's going on in that class at all times. You must recognize the antecedents. What is the antecedent? What happens when? Right before a behavior, okay? And that is very important because the suggestion is, and the evidence shows if we take care of the antecedents, then you can solve the behavior problem. And I'll give you an example of a regional day school example in just a couple of minutes. So then it says, I must know how to direct. Okay, redirection. Oh, don't you have a trip this afternoon? Or don't you want to participate in that tomorrow? Guys, sometimes these kids get so focused on negative. You know, you can't get them thinking about anything else, so you've got to come up with methodologies and strategies where you can redirect. And then the one down below is that you must understand the importance of escalation and de-escalation. What is your job when you get a child that has a behavior problem and gets into maybe a state of crisis? What's your job? To make sure you do something that what? De-escalates the situation. But here's the deal. If you get involved and it escalates, I want you to ask yourself, what is it that I did that caused that situation to escalate? And become aware of it. And so it's like self-regulating your own behavior. And what did I do that caused that situation to de-escalate? That's as important because you want to do that again down the road. But those general behavior skills or vocabulary, I think, are absolutely necessary for you to begin to get a hold of the whole thing about behavior. Now, in order to control your own behavior, this is what we said before, you first must control whose? Your behavior. And a lot of people say, well, that's easy, but what do you mean by that? So let me just do one thing. Down at the end, would you just stand up there for a second? Oh, yeah, she's going over. Here's what I'm going to do. All I want you to do is put your hand up when I begin to invade your person's space. Okay? So, here's the deal. I'm going to walk up and improvise. By the way, there's a behavior problem. Running up to the people. No, you don't run, you don't lose control of yourself, your eyes shooting, bugging out, your veins shooting, coming out of your head. You simply walk to the person. But when I begin to invade her personal space, I want her to put her hand. So I'm running and walking across this step. Okay, so here's okay, so if I'm training 40 people in the area of crisis, what I would do is I would say, okay, I want you to take another step in. Now I just want you to pay attention to her. Okay? So I take another step in. She almost can't stand it already, right? And the next thing is I tell everybody take another 6-inch step in. So what I want you to realize, guys, is we misuse this a lot. What do we guys do sometimes? Because we think we're rather tough. When somebody's acting out, what do? We get right in their faces. Guys, I am telling you, thank you. I am telling you that you can cause a situation either to escalate or de-escalate simply by using proximity. So what I want you to do when I say you need to control your own behavior, don't get in somebody's face. It's not good. You'll also notice that if I'm speaking with someone, a few people came up here and spoke, but if you're really observing me, you would usually see me on an angle. So the person is standing there and I'm talking to the person and I'm on an angle. That's because I've been trained in crisis. And what that means is if that child physically acts out, I know exactly what I'm going to do. Now you're going, oh my gosh, I've gotten to that point. Well, when you work at the regional day school, taking all the kids that no other public schools want, and it's in the behavior area, yes, you do have physically acting out children. So you'll always see me with this supportive stance, which is a show of respect and sign of respect. So, the proximity, you should be 1.5 to 3 feet away from that person, okay, in order to control your own behavior. I walked into the high school one time, and this is when I was in central office. I looked down the hall, and this teacher and this student are angels. And what it was the teacher told the kid to go to the office. The kid wasn't going to go to the office, so the teacher decides to grab a hold of him, to take him to the office. The next thing you know, they're almost wrestling. You know, there's a couple of teachers watching, not getting involved at all. Now, I'm really worried, okay, so what do? Do I run down there? You know, I walk down there, I see who's around, I get some information, and when I get there, I didn't know what I was going to do because it was really getting physical. All I did was I said, let him go and go to the office. Now, that kid, at that point, was glad to go to the office, okay, because of what just happened. He let it go, the kid went to the office, we kind of followed him down, but I don't think it should have ever been there in the first place. Touching the child, particularly if he's in a certain mode, you never want to touch a child under those circumstances. You might even want to go get help, okay, to have somebody be there as a witness, okay, but proximity is extremely important and the supportive stance. The other way that you control yourself is through your kinesis. And your kinesis is your body language, and you guys know what I'm talking about. I mean, you get there, your eyes are bugging out, your veins are bugging out. You know, you're screaming in some cases and carrying along, and a lot of others say you've never really screamed in cases, but then you're showing that child is one, and you're losing control of yourself, and that's something that you never want to happen. Okay? And then, of course, the paraverbal. It's not what you say again, it's how you say what you say. And you'll notice I say I always want to have total voice control, and I have underlined T, V, and C. What that means, what does the T stand for? What do you think? With your voice control. Tone. Okay, what would V stand for? Volume. And of course, C is cadence. Tone, volume, and cadence. So, if someone walked into the regional day school when I was principal, and I am standing there, and I went up and said, hey, can I help you? I mean, that's a little bit different than if I walked up to that person and go, can I help you? You know what I mean? And you know what I did. Tone, volume, and cadence. Well, we tend to do this with our kids who are acting out. It's almost like they are controlling us. So the very first thing you have to understand is those kind of 4 skills and vocabulary words. And the second thing is you have to recognize that if you want to control the behavior of others, you need to first control your own. And those are some of the examples. Okay? So here are some principles of crisis. Now, it's very interesting because my behavior affects the students and the students' behavior affects mine. Would you guys agree with that? Have you ever had somebody come in on a Monday morning and you go, gosh, he's going to be in one of those moods. And what do? Okay, I don't want to hear it. You know, it's Monday morning, I don't want to start. You can't even do anything at that point. You know, you certainly want to do that. But you have to understand that the way I act impacts the way he acts, and the way he acts impacts the way I act. The other thing is the irrational primitive behavior. When a child begins to become irrational, have you seen this? Absolutely. At times, when he begins to become irrational, guys, he doesn't hear your words. He only sees your body language. You really have to understand that concept. Okay? Because if it's not hearing your words, you can get loud, you can get rough, you can do all kinds of things. You can say all kinds of things. He's not listening to you. As a matter of fact, have you ever seen some kids where you go up and go, now quiet down, now quiet down. And the next thing you know, they got their hands up like that. It's like, oh my gosh, that's embarrassing. It's almost like, no, I'm not going to touch you, I'm not going to hit you. Guys, pay attention to the next time kids are tantruming in the grocery store. Okay, what happens? Parents end up holding the kid up with his arm, screaming and yelling at him. You know, what do you do when a kid tantrums in the grocery store? Man, I'll tell you what I do. I leave all those groceries in there. I don't want to bother anybody else. I take my child, I get out of there, I go home. And then I hold my child accountable. You have to understand that we always will give consequences. See, some of you, I know, believe that when you send children to the office, there's not always a consequence. That is simply not true. What you have to understand is that we are trying to help teachers deal with a behavior that they could not deal with. Okay? They come down, and then sometimes you don't see this kid crying in the office. Okay? But then the kid, real cocky, gets his hat on, turns it backwards, comes walking into the classroom like nothing had happened. And then the teacher really gets mad. See, nothing you do is going to make a difference with this kid. Bottom line is, as an administrator, I'm asking you to give me a chance to stop the problem from occurring, regardless of whether you agree with how I'm doing it or not. And if that doesn't work, the child's going to come back down to me anyway, and then I can issue additional consequences. So all of these methodologies and strategies, need support from the organization in which it comes from. So they do not hear the words, they see your body language. And once that's done, you've got to give him some time. See, 100% of the time, if the child is out of control, 100% of the time, the child will get back into control, and it's called tension reduction. Okay, that's the decrease in its physical and emotional energies. And then there's something called therapeutic rapport, which is absolutely important because, guys, remember what I said. Punishment will stop a behavior, but punishment does not change the behavior. Therapeutic rapport is the skills that you use, okay, to try to change that child's behavior. Like, what can you do about that next time? So what I like to normally do is use an actual example from the regional base school. Now, I do realize that those children tend to act out a tad more than those. But what we have is what they call a CI, crisis intervention. So they CI to the main office, CI to room B1, CI to the all-purpose room. So we got a CI that was in the all-purpose room. Unfortunately, my office is right across from the all-purpose room, so I was one of the first ones there. So I walk there, and what I see when I walk in is a child in the back of the all-purpose room, and he's completely and totally out of control. Okay? And we have supervisors, we have aides, and everything else. Now, we're going to have to make a decision. Am I going to do a room clear, or am I going to be able to get him out? Now, I've already told you I'm not going to run after that child, right? I'm not going to get in his face. But I walk quickly back to that child. And normally what I do, guys, I don't think I have normally what I would do is something like this. I usually have this, in case they become physically up now. I'll hit this as loud as I can. When I hit something, what happens to that child the second that I make that noise? He has what? Eye contact with me. So now I walk towards him. Okay, now I want you to think about this a second. I get up to him, and I go to put my arm around him, because the bottom line, oh, by the way, this is what he did. Some kid called his mother a whore, okay, that was sitting next to him. Okay? The kid took some chocolate milk, and he ran up to the wall, and he goes, boom! He throws it up against the wall, and there's chocolate milk all over the doggone place. And poor Mrs. Such and Such was standing there as the paraprofessional. She's covered in chocolate milk. Okay? So I go up, and I'm going to try to get him out of that question. I'm going to use any appropriate technique that I can get him out. And it's not getting in his face, it's not yelling at him or whatever. So what do? I go up and I put my arm around him, and I'm trying to kind of guide him out. Now, I have to say that not one time did I ever personally have to do a room clear. I was always able to get that child out. But what do you suppose he said to me when I put my arm around his shoulders? Don't touch me? Oh, man. You guys don't work for the regional base. Have any other idea? I'm telling you now, I don't say this for effect, I'm just telling you what he said. He said, get your fucking hands off of it. Okay? Now, most people believe what? Now, he does this, what, to get me? Because most of the time he does, and to this day, when I do this in the in-service, a lot of people don't know that use that language. Because it did exactly what those kids expected to do. So I have put my hand around him, and I begin to guide him out. He does that. And he said, he called my mother that. And I said, well, shouldn't you really be getting into trouble? Now, think about what I'm saying. I'm talking rationally to this kid. My tone is down. Shouldn't you be the person to get it? Why don't you come down to my office and we'll kind of talk about this? So the kid did come walking down. Now, here's the problem. We walked past poor Mrs. Paraprofessional with all the chocolate milk. Now, what do you suppose she's thinking when I've got my arm around this kid? Oh, yeah, come on down. You know, one of those kind of things. It's like she's walking there. Did you see what he did? I got chocolate milk all over me and all of that. What our staff needs to know, guys, there's methods behind our there's reasons why we're doing what we are doing, okay? What do I want to do? I want to get him down to my office. I do get him down to my office. He's still out of control. Here's irrational. He's in a crisis state of mind. What do you suppose I do at that time? Yeah, sit down, do nothing, sit at my desk, and just do my work. Now, most people think I'm absolutely crazy. That they were watching this, what's he doing? He's telling your mother, talking about your mother, he's doing all this kind of thing. All of a sudden, what's he begin to do? He begins to de-escalate because 100% of the time, tension reduction will take place, and he will de-escalate. Okay? Then, once I see that he's back into a rational state of mind, then what do? I reestablished my communication in a non-judgmental way with him. So I reestablished my communication and I began talking to him. And it's like, I'll say something like, Jesus, what do you think I should do about this? I don't know, you have to suspend me, kick me out for 10 days, I hate this second place, you know, it's that kind of thing. I said, well, that's a little harsh. I mean, wasn't such and such responsible for that? We would have this conversation. What do you suppose I did? What was my goal? To de-escalate that child. Unfortunately, it's only 11:30, we got to until like 3 o'clock. So we send them down to the class, and I say, look, I'm going to send you back to class, and I'm going to ask your teacher at the end of the day how well you did, and that's going to have something to do with what I decide, because you know there's always got to be consequences to this type of behavior. You know, sure enough, at the end of the day, I had to follow up, I bring him down, and he did do okay. Now remember, why am I kicking kids out of school? Because you're sending them to my school, because they can't handle regular school. However, in this case, it was pretty bad. So I said, look, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to suspend you 1 day out of school. When you come back in, I'm going to put you in school. And in school, you're going to write what you did wrong, why it was wrong, how you're going to improve that in the future. There's my learning aspect of this. See, the punishment will stop that behavior, but it won't change his behavior. Our job at the regional day school is to send kids back to the public school, so we have to try to change their behavior. So you see how that kind of, all occurred with the job of de-escalating that situation all the way through? Extremely, extremely important. Okay, so the way, just a couple of things on this, because we're going to move beyond this. The way crisis unfolds is you usually see anxiety, then they become defensive, then they can act out, and then there's tension reduction. If you get to the defensive stage, if you move down, you want to keep it verbal. You never want it to become physical. So if you get into the defensive stage, examples of that are question. They may ask you a question. Don't do this. They ask you the question and says, because I said to do it. Just answer the question. Okay, and then if it's more like what are you going to do if I don't, that's a little bit different. Now, I always ask my groups, how do you set a limit? We always say to all of you, how do you set a limit? We always say to all of our students at grad school, how to set limits, guys. But when I ask how do you set a limit, nobody seems to know. Does anybody have any idea how to set a limit sitting in here? Or do you have enough nerve to... Yeah. So don't you find it interesting that we administratively will say, how to set limits in the class? But then when I ask people, how do you set limits, nobody knows how to set a limit. So I just want to make sure you kind of know. Okay, you explain. First of all, they've got to be clear, simple, reasonable, enforceable. Please, guys, don't say, if I send you to the principal's office, you're going to get suspended. Don't say that. Because you're going to send them to an assistant principal or principal, and they're not going to suspend them at times, and then you look foolish. Don't say that. Just kind of understand that we're going to try to solve a problem if they're having difficulty. So you got to explain to them which behavior is inappropriate. I had one kid one time who was in the cafeteria, has these filthy shoes right next to everybody's lunch. He didn't know it because that's probably the way they live at home. Okay, so what did I have to say to him? They're very dirty, they could get someone sick, and etc. Explain why. Give reasonable choices and consequences. Now, do me a favor, would you put those down below and try to keep it that way? And then you allow some time for the kid to be prepared to implement the consequences. That's how you set limits, guys. They need to be clear, simple, reasonable, enforceable. They can be done in 30 seconds, but that's how you set a limit, which is something that no one can ever tell you how to do. So that is in your handout. So if you want to practice on that, I think it would be extremely important. Okay, and so this is that quote that we had that was up during the time that we had to break. And it kind of fits with this aspect of in service. So I come to the frightening conclusion I'm a decisive element of question. Geez, even the information I just got yesterday over the internet said we are the primary decisive elements of the question. It's my personal approach that creates the climate. It's my daily loop that makes the difference. Okay, I went into a class one time and I heard the teacher talking to the kids about his divorce. I didn't think that was appropriate, which bumped everybody out, right? So as a teacher, I possess tremendous power to make a child's life miserable or joyous. Would you guys all agree with that? Have you had teachers that made your life horrible, miserable? Have you had those teachers? I have. Okay, I can be a tool of torture or an instrument of inspiration. I can humiliate or humor or hurt or heal. I don't think anybody would disagree with that as well. Now, here's what's interesting. How many of you, by a show of hands, and really participate this time, know of a person who has humiliated, who has, okay, all of that. Raise your hand if you've known those teachers. Yeah, almost everybody. How many of you are one of those teachers? You know, it's kind of interesting, guys, because I never see anybody put a hand up for that, but I see everybody knows somebody. Something doesn't work out that way. In all situations, it's my response that decides whether a crisis will be escalated or de-escalated, and the child humanized or dehumanized. I absolutely love that. Yes?
I would say that with one person who's just humiliated,
Yeah. And you know what? And my comments to those kind of questions are absolutely correct. There's not one thing that's always going to be working for every single person, and there will be some exceptions to almost every rule that we talk about. So at this moment, in a minute, we're going to change over to, you can't get up out of your seats, okay, to the whole dyslexia thing. And we're going to see how this information kind of coincided with what was going on there. But I do want to ask the question, even though it's not quite at the end of the presentation yet. We started at about 8:15, and now it's about 10:25. I'm going to go back to the first quote. Do you think that right now you might be just a little bit better than you were at about 8:15? Yeah, and if you are, as a result of some of that information, then I think we're on the right path. Okay, so the handout, do we have, let's see, yeah, let me go here. Okay, so here's what you all know at this particular point. We're not going to go over all of that information, but I'm going to go over some of that information with you because I think it's extremely important. But I think what was interesting was last year, and I think it was August 9th, the State Department of Education passed a law that said that we need to give a great number of our staff 2 hours of in-servicing on dyslexia. And it was related to a lawsuit that had happened. And so everybody was told we have to do it that year. So we didn't find this out probably until about October or November that we began planning. We didn't even know about the law. So the State Department told us, yes, you absolutely have to provide 2 hours of in-servicing, and it had to be done by the end of that year. Well, somebody made a mistake, because what happened was if you pass a law after July 1, school districts need 1 entire year to implement what the new laws are. Since it wasn't passed until August 9th, doing it that year wasn't giving school districts 1 entire year to do it. Okay, so then, after we had serviced a lot of our people, what happened was, they told us, oh, no, you have to do that during the 14-15 school year. So that's where we are at. But one of those things that they decided was that this is the definition that has to be used in all school districts throughout the state of New Jersey. And it says a great deal here, actually, but probably the most important part of this is the very first sentence when it comes to the dyslexic kids. So dyslexia is a specific learning disability that is neurological in origin. It's a specific learning disability, which means if you're sitting here, and what is the program that you have in the district that's you deal with the lower cognitive kids? Employment orientation, yeah, things like that. If they have a reading problem, it's not like the reading problem that a dyslexia child would have, because dyslexia is tied into a specific learning disability. So those are the kids who have average and above IQs, okay, but their performance level is low. So in the handout, I am not giving you information to teach reading, okay, to provide that kind of programming so that they try to do what they can to adapt to this. What you need to know about dyslexia is you don't overcome it. You can adapt and adjust to it, but it does not go away. And my problem that I have with example teaching high school for such a long time, and kids that I actually knew were dyslexic, we didn't just give the name of it. To this day, those children from a mental health perspective feel so horribly about themselves because they're not able to read, to the degree that they should. So let me give you 2 examples. One worked in the road department at Lakers. So we ended up marrying a nurse, and we ended up with 3 children. So here he is now, he has 3 children, and the children at the time I was talking to him was like 5, 7, and 10 or something like that. Every one of them could read better than Dad. That was a true dyslexia. Okay? Every time I ran into that man, He would come to my office. I would see him, out and about. He would talk to me about his inability to read and how embarrassing it was. So when you're talking about giving chips, man, you really have to give a lot of chips to these dyslexic children. Okay, the other child that I had was fortunate enough to pass his ASVAB test. Okay, so he actually went into the service. And he learned how to put sheet metal on helicopters. And then eventually he learned how to do sheet metal on aircraft. I'm not going to tell you the airline because you might not believe it. But what was nice about this child was when he started working for the airline, he gave me 2 airline tickets anywhere in the country. I went for about 12, 18 years. So sometimes there are perks. He was the kid that in 6th grade he started to be able to read orally without reading letters. His writing to this day, he writes me a letter, no one can understand. I can understand. Okay, he ends up working for this particular airline. He married his wife, he has a professional job, and he has 2 children. The 2 children are also outreach family. So when he would give me these tickets, I would fly meetings and whether or Las Vegas or whatever the case may be. Every time we ran into each other, what are you supposed to tell us? Can you explain to me why I'm not reading? Okay? What we all have to understand is that again, you can adapt and adjust to it, but you're not going to overcome it. Okay, so what we want to do in your handout in just a little bit is we want to kind of spot. So if you don't mind, could we do one clip here? Now, catch up to the way. Okay, this is a fairly short clip. The person who's responsible for this.
At my school, it was really hard for me.
I definitely felt rushed.
It's just hard to spell words.
It's not that I'm stupid, or it's not that I don't try. It's that I'm dyslexic.
Everybody can learn, but everybody learns in a different way. Here, they teach me tricks. It was a cat. She would write it on the board, and then she would watch us do an act like this.
If you know that a kid's dyslexic, you need to talk to them and ask them if they need extra time.
She didn't do it fast. She didn't get impatient with me.
Some of us have learning disabilities, so those make us who we are, not who we shouldn't be. We're actually pretty smart, but we think outside the box. I understand some things and find some things that other people might not.
Don't give up. Everything will be okay. Just take a deep breath and advocate.
Why is it important to use the word dyslexia?
That's such an important question. I get asked that a lot. And I think it's the most important thing virtually in the life of the child or adult who's dyslexic. Because it's not simply a label. It's a label that you don't need it, but it brings with it enlightenment, information, and tells you what it's all about. So if you use the word dyslexia, it stands for something. You know what the basic problem is. You know where it lives in the brain. You know what the symptoms are. You know what the treatments are. And you know what the eventual outcome is. So why would you want to deprive a child, a parent, or a teacher of that valuable information?
In your multi-decade career studying dyslexia, you visited hundreds of classrooms, watching young people who are dyslexic and the whole classroom of kids who are not dyslexic. What do you think makes it a good classroom?
The thing about dyslexia, we say it's a hidden disability. And by that we mean children are smart, they look normal and even are attractive in every way. But what you don't see is the effort and the energy that has to go into doing the homework assignments and to the reading and spelling and writing in class. And so it's important for the teacher to be aware of that and to acknowledge that and to say to the child, gee, you really tried. That was a good job. So the child knows you're on the same side. What's great now is keyboarding. I know when I go into a class and I see kids with their laptops out, I say, this is a good class. This teacher gets it. That takes an artificial barrier away and allows students to express themselves. Every child who's dyslexic should have access to listening, should have access to documentaries or video, to using laptops. And you know what we learned? And this is really important. We've learned that what's good for dyslexic kids really helps all children and all students.
Because it often takes longer to learn to read English and to be fluent in English, learning a foreign language is particularly tricky. Tell me why very bright kids who have not learned to read in English and learn to write, why they have trouble with foreign languages.
I'm so glad you brought up this whole issue of foreign language, because many people don't understand. If you're a person who language comes easily to, you think, why can't they learn? But the primary difficulty in dyslexia is getting to the sounds of spoken words. So if a child has had difficulty, which invariably a dyslexic child has, learning the sound system of a primary language, imagine what happens when you have to learn the sound system of a secondary language and take all your courses at the same time. It is extremely difficult. And at Yale, one of the major things we did 15 years ago was institute a policy that states that if you are dyslexic, you can apply for a partial waiver of the foreign language requirement. What students can do is take a course in the culture of a country that speaks a foreign language. We have this policy, and what have we learned? We're so proud because Yale, 15 years later, I don't think it's fallen from the academic ladder. And the university is so proud of its graduates.
So I know that you've been working with these brilliant Yale students, both undergraduate level and law students and medical students and graduate students. And I know you know anecdotally how their lives have unfolded, but also you've done some research. How do these young people, what are the changes?
So what we did, working with a wonderful student, Blair Kennedy, we designed a study where we wanted to see Yale alums 5 years or more after they had graduated from Yale. We had a group of alums who were dyslexic and a group who were not. For comparison, equal numbers. And what we found was while they were students, what differentiated them was it did take longer for the students to complete a test or to do their work. And they tended perhaps to get a little more anxious because anxiety is part and parcel of dyslexia often. But they participated in extracurricular activities. They enjoyed their life. They took a full range of courses. So their college life was very fulfilling. After they graduated, they said, well, what are you doing? What's your occupation? How much do you earn? What have you found? And we found wonderful things. In terms of occupations, there was not a difference. We found that the students who were dyslexic compared to the non-dyslexics tended to persevere. And they found that because they had overcome so many hurdles, that was part of their life. But they also found, because they were able to look at the big picture and be creative, they were really excellent at finding ways out of challenges, whereas other people who may have gone straight and not had these challenges, they meet a challenge and it was all over.
What can any of us do on the state level, on the federal level? There really are some roadblocks that need clearing out.
Today, that's a very important question of what can be done at state and federal levels. For some strange reason, schools are not recognizing dyslexia. They're not identifying the children. 1 out of every 5 children and adults is dyslexic. So every classroom has children who are dyslexic. And sometimes I'll visit a classroom and I'll say to the teacher, do you have any children who are dyslexic in your class? And I'll say, oh, no. And I'll say to myself, yes, you do. You just haven't identified them. And it would be be so important for the child, but also fulfilling to the teacher to be able to identify them. So I think we need actually a federal level legislation that does several things. One, that legalizes dyslexia. You can't do away with it and cover your eyes and say, oh, I'm not going to look at it and see it. It's there. And it would be so much better if those children were identified by the school and recognized. The legislation needs to ensure that children who are dyslexic receive evidence-based intervention. And that shouldn't be a struggle. Our society needs all the creative, capable people that it can find. And here we have people who are dyslexic, who are bright, who are eager to contribute. We really, as a society, complain, oh, we need more this, we need more scientists, we need more writers. We have them, and we're not letting them express their intellect and desire to contribute to society.
Guys, if there's one group of children that really need more chips at the end of the day, than when they woke up, it is this group, and that's what I was trying to tell you when I gave you those examples. Obviously, we're not going to be able to go through that handout, but if you take a look, these are the topics that are within it. So you have the basics to common signs, ways to spot it in the classroom, how they learn, strategies and accommodations, almost everything that you as people that are dealing with vocational school children is up there. And then, of course, you would always go by the other thing. So I want to kind of draw this down a little bit, but you can use that handout. I think it would be very helpful. So, guys, I want you to understand where I am coming from as we close out here, and I kind of go back to those standard quotes. I want you to understand that I believe that there is no other more important job than being a teacher in our society today. It absolutely doesn't exist. Some people say, well, if I was a surgeon, that's at a higher level than, being a teacher. That's absolutely not true. Because in order to become a surgeon, what do you have to have? Really good teachers. If I was an environmental engineer and I could, save the world as a result of some of the things that I create, that's not true, because we need our educators in order to teach them to get to the point where they can be environmental engineers. So I want you to kind of be proud of what you're doing, and I always want you to work on your own personal professional improvement, which goes back to how good are you compared to how good you can be. Okay, whether you think you can use this information or whether you think you can't, you're probably right. If you do what you've done, you'll get what you've got. It's the unlucky who learn from experience. It's the lucky who learn from the experience of others. Sweet are the uses of adversity, because we know at one time or another we are going to blow it. Okay, and then whether you think you can use this information or whether you think you can't, again, you are probably right. So my encouragement is to, continue to work on your own personal professional improvement. And then hopefully I want you to have what I've had, and that's after 41 years in one school district. I was just as excited about my 41st first day of school as I was my first day of school. And that's a result of learning all of this information over a period of time. So I hope it's helped, guys, and I appreciate your attention, and have a good time with the rest of it.
So much. We really got a lot out of that. We really do appreciate everything you gave to us today. Thank you. Just so you know, that handout, the booklet on dyslexia, because we do have to do 2 hours of, of professional development, we'll be looking at that booklet throughout the year, incorporating some additional bits of that into our faculty meetings. So please don't lose that. Hang on to that. Okay. The next part of our program is going to start at 11 o'clock. And we've got to give it up for Mr. Loperson again, because he made it. We have some room assignments here. Share time teachers, applied academic teachers are going to remain here in the multi-purpose room. We are going to do a little bit on co-teaching. School nurses are going to the guidance conference room. Counselors to the media center, LPN instructors, room 218. And then all of our academic areas, anyone in those specific areas are going to break out to the rooms that are listed there. And then the PAA majors are going to go to room 216. You're going to be sharing best practices and having your department meetings at that time. So I really need you back here, share time teachers and related academics teachers. Please try to just make a quick 10-minute break so we can get started at most out of the related applied academic teachers that are assigned to your program. I think that you'll really benefit from this. And I want to introduce to you our speaker. His name is Dr. John Hannah. He is an educator, 42 years of experience. I could list it all, but he's really done it all. The most recent would be 11 years as a superintendent. District? High Point. Does anybody know what that is? I don't know what that is. He's also an adjunct for Rutgers. He consults with Stockton, and he is a speaker that was found for me from the Southern Regional ETTC Center when I explained to them that we wanted to do something on co-teaching. So Dr. Hannah came to one of our schools. He watched Mrs. Hennis work with service occupation program in the Town Center so that we could get a real feel for what it is that we do here. And he developed a presentation just especially for you. So I hope that you will welcome him. Dr. Hannah.
Thank you very much. I did customize this program based on my observations and information that I received about the district. It's exciting to be here. This is a great school district, and there's a lot of fantastic things going on. The whole idea of co-teaching in a CPE setting is kind of unique. I was not able to find very much out there that would kind of support this model, so I really didn't feel like I was able to customize the program just for you. The way that this will work today, Ms. Young is passing out the evaluation, so I ask you to fill that out now before my presentation. I would ask you to fill that out for me before you leave. It is helpful to me as I move forward with other schools and other presentations to hear any recommendations that you might have in terms of how we can make things better. So that's number one. The last slide in your handout has my email address. I encourage you, if you have any questions about anything that we talked about today or anything you think I might be able to help you with in the future, just send me an email. I will get back to you and hopefully be able to help answer some of your questions. Okay? The uniqueness of your program is, I think, fantastic. The tone, as far as what I'm hoping you will leave here today with, is the importance of collaboration. You have an opportunity where you have a CTE teacher working with a language arts specialist or a math specialist. So you have an opportunity where you have an expert in one area working with an expert in another area, and both areas are critical. We're going to show a video, actually only portions of the video because our time is limited today, but we're going to show a portion of the video from the International Center for Leadership in Education that kind of, well, it took place at a model schools conference about 5 or 6 years ago, where Bill Daggett, who's the chief operating officer, anyway, of the International Center, who was also a CTE teacher, talks a little bit about the importance of reading in the content area. And we're going to develop that a little bit as we go through the program today, because with the structure that you have, the CTE teacher needs to understand the importance of teaching reading or math or whatever it is that you're supported in the content area. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. So we're going to start off with a little bit of a definition of co-teaching. Then we're going to take a look at some of the models that are out there. I've selected 5 models. Again, not any one specific model must apply to your situation. So we're going to have a little bit of an opportunity to talk about what you may be able to do in terms of adapting that model or a combination of models to your situation. And again, as I said in the beginning, the key to this whole process is collaboration. Okay? All right, so co-teaching. What is it? Well, simply defined, co-teaching is the pairing of a general education teacher and a special education teacher in a classroom filled with diverse learners. Integrated co-teaching, which is what you have, provides a specially designed instruction and academic instruction to a group of students with and without special needs in an inclusive classroom. Okay? So that essentially is what this is all about. It doesn't sound like it's very complicated, but when you get 2 experts together in one room, that's where we have the need for collaboration, the need for trust, the need for teamwork, the need to be able to collaborate together. So you're going to see some page numbers on here because I've taken a lot of information from this book, Teaching in Tandem by Wilson and Ledbeck. So wherever you see the page numbers, that's what it's from. So the 5 models that we're going to talk about today, one teach, one support, parallel teaching, station teaching, alternative teaching, and teaming are all models of co-teaching. The first one teach, one support, is probably the one that most of you have been operating under in one way or another. One teacher has primary responsibility for teaching the content material to the entire class, while the other teacher observes students, circulates through the room, giving students support, assistance as needed, and interjects general comments and suggestions to the class. In your case, the one teacher who has primary responsibility for teaching the content, on one day might be the CTE teacher, on another day it might be the support teacher. What I hope you leave here with today is an understanding that the information that you share between the 2 experts in the classroom should be something that is integrated in the instruction throughout the week, whether the support teacher is there or not. Because in your profession and in your career and technical education field, what you're going to learn today, if you don't already know it, is your reading levels are probably the highest reading levels of any of the professions as far as requirements are concerned. You actually are in an area where all of this information out there about preparing students for college, the bottom line is preparing students for the professions or the careers that you are preparing them for does prepare them for college. So if you focus on what you are preparing students to do, that will include preparing students for college. Because in essence, your area of expertise focuses on problem solving, developing career awareness. These things are critical to having students prepared for college as well as prepared for a career. Okay? So, some of the positive aspects of one teach, one support. Many students in the class receive individual attention. You have 2 teachers in there, all right? Students are given gentle reminders to stay on task. Student confusion can be individually resolved. Informal assessment of student learning occurs easily and naturally. Little planning time is needed. Now, I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk with each other a couple of times during the presentation today. But this whole idea of planning time and collaboration is so important. I realize that you probably don't have enough time to plan together. So my advice and suggestion to you is whenever you do get that opportunity, take advantage of it. Use it wisely. It's not a time for you to go and say, oh, I've got some free time. It's a time for you to work with your partner teacher and talk about the kinds of things that are important to your students going forward in that particular area. As we go through this, if you have any questions, please stop. Yes? Yeah, what that means is the model itself does not require a lot of common planning time. Right. Yes, I'm sorry if I implied that I didn't mean you have to plan, obviously. Okay, so some of the challenging aspects of one-to-one support. Parity can be severely compromised when teachers assume the dominant role and students perceive teachers as unequal. So you have two teachers in the room, one teacher's kind of sitting in the back of the room reading a book. That's just not going to work. It's not going to work because that teacher will be perceived by the students as not important to that particular aspect of the lesson. Supporting teacher may be perceived as an aide and not a teacher. I don't know if you've ever been in that situation, but you are both professionals. You're both experts in your field. You're not an aide. The supporting teacher may feel that he or she is not sufficiently contributing to the instruction of the students. This is where collaboration comes into play. Again, it's so critical. Students do not get the intensity of instruction needed in a one teach, one support model in some cases. Okay? The one teach, one support model I put up first because in many cases, because of planning time, common planning time, because of other factors, this is the only model that you're able to use in co-teaching. I am not suggesting that this is the best model. Okay? And that's why, as I said in the beginning, I am hopeful that when you leave here, you'll have some things to talk about with each other in terms of what is the best model for you going forward. I realize you've already started the year, but there's always room for change. There's always room for improvement. Okay? So the best time to use one teach, one support, when planning time is very limited. When whole group instruction seems most appropriate. And in some cases, depending on the career tech ed area that you are teaching, whole group instruction may seem most appropriate. When co-teachers are beginning to become adjusted to each other's style. So in other words, some of us don't have the luxury of having the same co-teacher year in, year out. Sometimes because of scheduling, planning, retirements, what have you, change occurs. So you need to get adjusted to the new co-teacher. And then another good time to use one teach, one support is when the special educator is kind of learning the content. A lot of times, they're in an area with you that is brand new to them. So that's one teach, one support. The next model that I'd like to talk a little bit about is called parallel teaching. The class is divided into two heterogeneous groups. Each teacher directly instructs the same content to half of the group. Now, the only time that that would work in your case is when the co-teacher, the support teacher, has a good understanding of what it is that you do. So if you've had somebody with you for many, many years, this parallel teaching model may be very effective. If the co-teacher has absolutely no idea about the particular career area that they're working in, then this wouldn't work. Right? So some of the positive aspects, you immediately decrease the student-to-teacher ratio by half. You increase the possibility of more students responding and participating in class discussions. And it increases the teacher's ability to access student understanding. And the parity is a little bit more positive. Some of the challenging aspects, thorough, common planning time is needed for this parallel model to work. Both teachers must have mastery of the content. The teachers must carefully synchronize time. Some teachers and students have difficulty adjusting to multiple people speaking at the same time, although many report that with practice, it's really not a detracting factor. And in a lot of cases, in the areas that you teach, it's definitely not a detracting factor, and you have room to separate. And that goes to this one. Some classes are not physically conducive to this model. So the best time to use parallel teaching when teachers are equally confident in the content, to introduce new content, to create a more intensive environment for test review or review of test answers, homework review, and guided practice. Now, if you think about it, if we have the CTE teacher and the language arts specialist on the same page teaching the vocabulary development for that particular CTE area, the expertise is really shared. The CTE teacher knows the vocabulary. The language arts teacher knows how to teach the vocabulary. There can be a good sharing in terms of what needs to be done in that area to get the students to understand the vocabulary or the language arts, or whatever aspects of the language arts curriculum you're trying to develop. So that's parallel teaching. The next one is station teaching. And I would think that some of you are very familiar with station teaching without the co-teaching model. With the co-teaching model, you now have the ability to have stations in the classroom with two teachers, one teacher at each station, and maybe another group is working independently on their own, which really narrows the gap as well. So station teaching divides the class into 2, 3, or 4 heterogeneous groups. Each teacher directly instructs a group on a particular aspect of the topic, while students in other groups work independently on materials that reinforce or extend their skills. Some of the positive aspects of this, teacher parity is highlighted. Student-to-teacher ratio decreases, obviously, depending on how many stations you have set up in the classroom. Student response rate is increased. Differentiated instruction is possible because you can now focus on a particular group that's having a specific problem that needs a little bit more time to work on it. Personal attention and assessment are improved. Some of the challenging aspects, precise planning of content and grouping is necessary. Students must be able to work cooperatively or independently if there are 3 or more groups. Noise level in the classroom may increase, but I don't know that would or should become a problem for you, because I think that in the hands-on atmosphere that you're working in now, there's going to be a certain amount of noise level. Okay? So the best time to use station teaching, when particular skills need to be developed in small, concentrated, and focused lessons. For example, when working on a unit related to the figures of speech, one teacher might focus on similes, the other teaches metaphors, while the independent group engages in some kind of creative writing assignment. Groups then rotate so that all students participate in each station. If you're interested in this type of co-teaching, you need to plan this together and decide what stations you're going to have in the classroom and who's going to do what. Alternative teaching is another example. One teacher is responsible for the large group of students while the other teacher instructs a small group of students. This might be good if you're having some kind of when do you think this particular model might work effectively in your setup, in your classroom? Exactly. You have a few year one students that they may need an opportunity to cluster together to get more intensive instruction. So the alternative teaching model would help with that. Some of the positive aspects, it provides a unique opportunity to deliver intensive and individualized instruction to students. Offers opportunities for reinforcement or enrichment to a smaller group of students. Some of the challenging aspects, overuse can lead to segregated practices within the classroom. So if you really like this and you do it all the time, that can lead to some problems as well. If teachers occasionally take a smaller group to another room because of noise or space considerations, care must be taken to avoid any negative consequences and potential stigma attributed to those students. So the best time to use alternative teaching, anytime there's a need for small group instruction. Large group works on an activity with supervision from one co-teacher while the other co-teacher meets with 3 students to discuss their academic progress or specific questions about the work. It allows for the much-needed opportunity to work in a small, intensive setting, but group membership must be rotated to avoid stigma that may be attached to certain small groups of students going to the back of the room. Any questions on alternative? Yes.
I imagine you could share the team also class sessions moving forward.
Right. The question was, well, suppose you recognize halfway through the lesson that one student really could benefit from the work that's going on in another group. It has to be done carefully, but yes, that is one of the positive aspects of this type of teaching. All right. So the last one that we're going to talk about today is, the last one that we're going to talk about today is teaming. Both teachers teach and support each other and the students at the same time. Both teachers are adept at curriculum content and effective teaching and learning techniques and have established professional equity and parity. Right? Now, this can look a little bit like one teach, one support. So you have to be cognizant of that as you go back and forth. Some of the positive aspects, it creates a highly dynamic classroom because you're feeding off of each other. It supports the parity of teachers because they run the classroom collaboratively. It allows presentation of information in multiple ways with multiple perspectives. You're getting at least 2 different perspectives. It promotes respect between the teachers as they also serve as a model for students respecting one another. And I got here about an hour early today because I always do that to set up. So I was able to see how you respond to crisis in the classroom and dyslexia, and that was a great presentation. So, the idea of promoting respect between teachers and serving as a role model for students, I think is an important one. And it facilitates flexible groupings as needed. Again, your decision. Some of the challenging aspects, it does masquerade as one teach, one support if one teacher simply offers comments or perspectives during the class. The teaming model is interactive and intensive. So it can't be the one teacher teaching and the other person just chiming in every once in a while. That would be more like one teacher lesson. Requires a high degree of expertise in both content and process from both teachers. So the best time to use teaming, maybe there isn't a best time. While we're working on getting the computer back up, that was the last model. What I want you to do as a group is just talk with your neighbor or if you can, with your support teacher, but I realize that might not be possible. What I'd like you to do is come up with what kind of hybrid model. Don't just take the one that you have right now. But based on what you've seen in these 5 models, what kind of a hybrid model do you think would work best for you? So take a few minutes to discuss that with everyone. Okay? Math and science.
We all work together.
You all work together and do teaming. Now, what about the work in the classroom with the CTE teacher?
Well, we all work together. Like, the math teacher might come down and present, but I know what she's presenting, so we will teach together a lot of times. Or I might bring in something that she's talking about that might, whatever program they're learning, that they, build it into that. So we work together, not all do it.
That's great. Working together, collaborating is what this is all about. Let me throw one out there, though. Going along with that, do you have times when the CTE teacher will say to you, I'm working on this particular aspect of reading the manual, and my students are having difficulty with X, Y, or Z. Can you come up with strategies that I can use in the classroom when you're not there?
Yes, well, I am a CTE teacher and she's an English teacher. We do exactly that.
Perfect. That's fantastic. So you don't need me. This is great. Anyone else? Any other hybrids you come up with? Come on. Okay, good.
When we're working on, I think resume is a really great area to be able to team teach, because obviously the CTE teacher has an expertise in the skills area, and the English teacher has the expertise in the overall presentation of the resume. So I was asking this one about maybe we will do a first year, second year breakdown. We all know how the second year students say, I haven't seen my resume, right? So I'm thinking we could split them up, and the training teacher can work more with the second years, and the English teacher can work with the first years.
Great. And that notion of doing something that we haven't already done before and taking a risk, whether it's based on a program that you see or a collaboration that you have with each other, I think that's fantastic. That's what our kids need. That's what our programs need. Your comfort level needs to be up there as far as, will I be supported if I take these risks and they don't work? But yes, that's great. That's a good adaptation. Any others? Okay, what I'd like you to do now is we're going to prep the computer, if it's cooperative, to show a video. And we're going to talk to you a little bit about the video because, as I said in the beginning, I don't have time to show the whole video, but there are certain aspects of this video that I think are very, very apropos to what we're talking about today. So before we get to the video, what I would like you to do in your handout, you have a handout that's called Collaborative Teaching Responsibilities. I would like you to work with your partners in terms of answering the question, who should take the responsibility for each area noted in that handout. So the The first area, it says who will be responsible for identifying goals and objectives for the course. Who will be responsible for training instructional activity? I'd like you to really think about this because, again, collaboration is key. So take about 5 minutes to work on that while we do working as a CTE teacher and a support teacher, there will be times when there are disagreements. There will be times when there are conflicts. But if you have developed a level of trust with each other, you're going to be able to work through those conflicts. And what I heard before about taking some risks and trying some new things, that's really what comes out of conflict. So you don't necessarily have to be in agreement on everything at all times. You won't be. You won't be, but you need to be able to talk about those things and in a sense, embrace the conflict that you're going to be working through. So let's just take a look at some of these. Who would be responsible for identifying goals and objectives for the course? How many said the CTE teacher? How many said both? How many said the special educator? You had to get to that one. Let's try it again. How many said the classroom teacher or the CTE teacher is the one responsible? Okay. And how many said the special educator is the one responsible? How many said both? Okay, thank you. Now, again, this handout is not meant for you to come to a conclusion today, but it is meant for you to include it on an agenda for discussion at a common planning meeting. So let's skip down. Teaching specific class content. Who did you have responsible for that? How many had the CTE teacher? How many had the special ed teacher? And how many had both? All right, good, good. How about, and this is an interesting one when it comes to co-teaching. How about establishing and implementing grading procedures? How many said that's all the CTE teacher? How many said it's all the special ed teacher? How many said it's both? Great. Great. Okay. Maintaining home contact. All right, let's talk a little bit about that. How many said the home contact piece is all the CTE teacher? How many said it's the special ed teacher? How many said it's both? Great. So this, as you can see, this handout will give you a foundation for discussion going forward in your common planning meetings. Okay? What I'd like to do now is I'd like you to take a look at a video. Again, only a portion of which you're going to see. But the video comes from the International Center for Leadership in Education. Bill Daggett is the person that you will see in the video. As a matter of fact, Bill Daggett was just at the school boards convention in Atlantic City, I think, a couple of weeks ago. The basic message in this video is that CTE prepares kids for both career and college. And preparing kids for a career is actually more challenging than preparing them for college. I don't know if you embrace that, if you accept that or not, but Bill Daggett will make that point in the video. The focus is the importance of teaching reading in the content area and why that's so important. And I believe that here in this district, you're in a great position because you have the reading language arts expert, you have the math expert, you have the science expert, and you have the CTE expert, all together with an opportunity to do some common planning. And that doesn't exist in many places. So let's take a look at, now we're going to jump around a little bit, so please bear with me.
Have been pushing for school reform. Now, how many of you indeed were working in schools way back in 1983? And what national report came out that year? I said it yesterday, The Nation. And what group was it that pushed school reform so hard in 1983? And to this day, 2008, 25 years later, continues to push school reform so hard? It's not the kids. It's not even higher education. It's not the parents. Who is it, folks? It's business. Now, if business is the group pushing school reform so hard, business is the group that is so concerned with how our schools are doing, why career and tech ed people aren't they beating down the doors to demand more career and tech ed? See, the first step in solving a problem is defining the problem. Career and tech ed people in the room, don't get angry with me. We have a serious image problem. And that's precisely what it is. I don't believe it's a program problem. I don't think your program is out of whack. I think it's an image problem. Because you know what people think about career and tech ed? They think it is a great program for somebody else's child. Because my son and daughter is going to go to, and somehow they say it is different. Now here's the message I'm going to try to take you to by the end of the session. I want you to have people convinced, yes, we are about preparation for the workplace. And that they're going to want the kids to go to career and tech ed more than to college prep. Because I think where I'm going to take you is to show you that the cutting edge career and tech ed programs in the country actually do a better job of preparing kids not only for work but also for college. So you got to change your image. I'll take you through 4 parts of an agenda. Kind of the larger context of society. Why is it everybody's pushing school reform? That won't specifically talk about career and tech ed. It'll just talk about why we're pushing school reform. I'll then talk to you about, in that larger context of society that is changing, what are the skill requirements? What does a worker truly need? But I'm not going to talk about the job-specific skill. I'm going to talk about the academic skills. Then I'll talk about the status. Where are we? And finally, I'm going to give you a...
We're going to fast forward a little bit to really get into this notion of teaching in the content area and teaching reading in the content area. Any comments as we're getting there? Any comments on what you saw so far? Yes.
I totally agree. Both these two things really fast backwards. And I don't have enough time to go more content versus hands-on. Hands-on content, but constantly putting one another, trying to get all that done in the short period of time that we have.
Right, and I think...
all the other school requirements and workplace and English and math science.
And now with the testing requirements and the evaluation, the evaluation requirements and SGOs, all that stuff. I understand exactly what you're saying, but you're in a great position because you have two experts in the room. You have the ability to talk to each other. You may not be able to do everything that you want to do. You can begin to put that.
A real basic question. Is reading important, yes or no? A little or a lot? You all know the research. Want to do a good job in teaching reading? You teach reading and how many career tech ed teachers again in the audience? How many of you have spent at least 20% of your instructional time this past year teaching reading in the content area? No, not having them read. Teaching reading. Well, wait a minute. I guess I don't understand. Oh, well, let me try a question I asked you the other day. How many in the room believe it would be in your own personal best interest if you lost 10 pounds? How many know how to lose 10 pounds? And how many therefore simply have chosen not to? Let me give you a parallel set of questions. Is reading important, yes or no? A little or a lot? Want to do a good job teaching reading? You teach reading in the... Who simply chooses not to? Forgive me. Career tech ed teachers. Career tech ed teachers. Teach what? Career tech ed. This country, what's the number one reason in America kids are failing the middle school and high school state mathematics test? Number one reason. It's a reading problem. Doesn't mean you're good at math, but it's a reading problem. But math teachers don't teach reading in the content area. Math teachers teach, and career tech ed teachers teach. See, go back and review exactly what you told me. Reading is critical. But if you're going to do a good job in teaching reading, you teach reading in the content area. By every international standard I'll show you today, America is 1 or 2 in the world in reading in 4th grade. Despite the fact that we take every child in, despite the fact that we have sometimes not high enough expectations, despite the fact that we have nearly the shortest school day and shortest school year in the industrialized world, we're still number 1 or 2 in reading in 4th grade. By 8th grade, we slipped to the middle of the pack. By 12th grade, we slipped to the very back. And you know, folks, there's something wrong with that picture. Why does it happen? Because in America, forgive me, we refuse to follow the research. Business and industry does not know why our kids aren't doing well and are not competitive. I suggest to you we do, but we choose not to address it. Any group that can begin to articulate clearly why literacy is so important in the 21st century, and then show why literacy is a top priority in their program, becomes the winner of the 21st century. In career and tech ed, you are in a marvelous position to do that. You know the problem we get, however, is when I was a high school teacher in career and tech ed, you know what? How I thought you taught reading? Somebody just said it in the audience. I thought you taught reading by giving a reading assignment. I wasn't trying to be defiant. I just didn't know how to do it. So let me ask you, what is your 1, 3, and 5-year professional development plan in each of your districts to make sure that every career and tech ed teacher knows how to and is held accountable for teaching reading and content? Because, by the way, if they do that, it will take between 20 to 30% of their total instructional time, the research tells us. But you know what? If you don't teach it, these kids have planned obsolescence. Because the technology is moving so fast. They're going to have to be lifelong learners. Drive it home, let me show you the research. This past year, we took 75 school districts across America. We went out and we looked at their 11th and 12th grade English language arts classrooms. I know we got administrators in here as well as teachers, so some of you may have background in English language arts. Do we have any present or former English language arts teachers in the audience? Okay. This is 11th and 12th grade English language arts materials nationwide. Because you got 75 high schools, you got basically every publisher's materials, you basically got every school in the country. Because that's what they're reading. This is the middle two quartiles of the materials. You know what two quartiles means? The top of that white bar is a 75th percentile of the materials. The bottom of the white bar is a 25th percentile. This is the middle two quartiles. That's what kids are reading in the English language arts. We then followed those kids to college. We had our major initiative with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We had research funds to do some massive research. We went in and looked at technical colleges, two-year community colleges. We looked at little arts colleges. We looked at state universities. We looked at Ivy League schools, wherever these kids from those 75 high schools were going. And we said, give us what the kids have to read in their freshman and sophomore year. And this is where it falls. Which is, by the way, exactly where you would want it to fall. Improve a little bit, challenge them a little bit, but not so much they can't do it. And as I said yesterday, we looked at all the other 11th and 12th grade courses, and that's where they fall. Every high school we've looked at in America, the English language arts departments have the lowest reading requirements. They read more there, but that which they read is lower level. Everybody remember what discipline has the highest reading requirements? Career and Tech Ed. Science is second, math is third. Career and Tech Ed has the highest reading requirements. How come? Because how many of you still have your DVD clocks going 12 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 12 o'clock? What does the worker in Career and Tech Ed have to be able to read? A manual. How can you read the manual if you don't know the vocabulary? If you don't understand the context of it? You can't teach that reading until you teach the program. But you know what? It's called teaching reading and content area. We follow those kids to college. That's what they're at in college, and other than English language arts, the military. Personal use, asked 100 parents in each of 75 communities, 7,500 parents nationwide, what do they want kids to read if they're going to become independent? Again, tax forms, contracts, insurance information. Entry-level jobs, again, we talked about it yesterday, that's where it falls. Compare entry-level jobs, personal use in the military to high school academic standards. Now permit me to show you SATs, ACTs, and advanced placement test. Lower than entry-level jobs. Lower than entry-level jobs. And by the way, that last column right here, ever since the year 2000, that number has been falling. And every year since the year 2000, all three of these have been rising. If we go back to the year 2000, actually this is the highest. Can anybody in the room tell me why these three are rising? Because technology is becoming more pervasive. And it's the technology driving reading levels higher. Are SATs, ACTs, and advanced placement tests falling? What's the greatest single pressure college trustees put on college presidents? Fill the seat. Because if we don't fill the seat, what don't you get? If I don't get money, what do I have to do to my faculty? I can't give them contractual pay raises, I can't build new buildings, I can't bring in new technology. So what has every college in this country been doing? Decreasing or increasing the number of students they're taking in? Increasing. At the exact same time, since the year 2000, remember my demographic data yesterday, the number of young people in America is declining. How many ever studied supply and demand? The number of students decrease, but the number I take in goes up. What do I end up doing? Dipping deeper and deeper into the pool. Ladies and gentlemen, colleges then complain bitterly about your students and say they have to give them remediation. I can tell you as a former college administrator how to solve that problem. Stop taking students they never would have taken a decade ago. The workplace, military personal use continue to decline, higher education goes down. That was the 75th percentile of all high school graduates last year. Which, by the way, SATs, ACTs, and advanced placement will stay right at the 75th percentile of all high school graduates for 2 decades. It just keeps dropping. There are 16 career clusters in the country. Altogether, class, how many career clusters? 16. The highest reading requirements of any of the 16 is the bottom left-hand side. Scientific research engineering. It is number 1 in terms of reading requirements. But let me tell you what we found in our research. 6 out of the 16 clusters, in 6 out of 16 clusters, entry-level workers actually have higher reading requirements today than intermediate and advanced level workers. So altogether again, how many clusters are there? And how many levels of each? 3. Entry, intermediate, advanced. 6 of the 16 clusters, the entry-level worker has the highest reading requirements. In 7 of the clusters, the entry-level worker is higher than either the intermediate or advanced. Why? How could that be? It wasn't true a decade ago. One word: technology. I say again, what do entry-level workers have to read? Manuals.
I agree with what you're saying. The thing is, though, in your career tech ed teachers, therefore, having 2 people in the classroom working with these students, whether it be reading in the content area or math in the content area, whatever it may be, has to be an advantage for your students because the vocabulary is so specific to that particular area. So having an expert in reading work with an expert in auto mechanics allows for that marriage to take place. And that's where the co-teaching, I think, is most effective. Any other reaction to the video? Yes?
What's happening between 4th grade and 12th grade that our reading levels are dropping and we're falling behind?
Basically, as what Dr. Daggett was saying, did you notice his tie, by the way? That was totally by accident. But basically what Dr. Daggett was saying was, we teach reading in 4th grade. We gradually stop teaching reading. By the time they're in 12th grade, we don't teach reading. We might teach literature or something like that, but we no longer teach reading and context and the vocabulary in context. We don't teach that anymore necessarily in 12th grade. So for that reason, he's saying our scores are going down. Yes?
Do you think that's something that should be maybe readdressed not with the vocational teacher, but with the direct academic teacher, so that we're continuing that education with the progression of their educational experience?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I am talking to you as career tech ed teachers, and for 2 reasons. First, your area has been identified as the most challenging area in terms of preparing a student for a career as well as for college. So, and the fact is, if I was talking to a group of strictly academic English teachers or math teachers, it would be a little bit different. But I tried to customize this program to the fact that you are a career tech ed. You don't necessarily want to hear about just one aspect, the academic aspect. You want
transition to be smooth in career and tech ed as well. Yes?
We have this game of basketball, and when you're at the fourth grade level, that's when you have a single instructor, and by sixth grade they start to break off and play science class. And everybody thinks the other person's doing the job.
Right.
And in all actuality, we basketball because, like I said, we need our students to be able to be our textbooks. So we have to do our share also. And you can go even another level above, which you did, which is the colleges. In culinary, we used to have the certificate program. And the colleges wanted to keep the certificate program as a big system of colleges. Well, now they don't want to do the kids articulation credits unless you teach reason. They want to do teaching because they're unable to obtain the students that can read past that test. So up and down the board, I think we all have to take a piece of this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I applaud you. I mean, that's exactly what we're talking about. That was the message that I was hoping would come across as a result of this video, and the message that you are in a very, very good position because you do have the access to experts on both sides. So you can, excuse me, with your common planning time, you can begin to address these things because if you don't teach reading in the content area, even though you may have a very specialized manual, let's say, the kids aren't going to learn it, or they're going to struggle with it. And in places where they have vocational education without co-teaching, they don't have the advantage that you have. So that's where we are. Okay? 16 career clusters Dr. Baggett talked about. The entry-level jobs have the highest reading requirements. The entry-level jobs. It's 6 out of the 16, and 7 out of the 16 they're second, and that's consistent across the country. We talked about the Lexile framework. We had a little discussion about that, but I still think no matter how you look at this, career and tech ed has one of the highest reading requirements, and that, to me, reinforces the setup that you have here at Ocean Ed. Okay? So, some of the advantages, and I realize I'm running a little low on time here, but some of the advantages of co-teaching at CPE. First of all, you're going to lower the student-teacher ratio. You're going to have 2 voices in the class instead of 1. You're going to be able to deal with differentiation of instruction a little better. You're going to be able to deal with student engagement a little better because you have 2 people in that classroom. Behavior management should be a little easier as well, having 2 teachers working off of or with each other. So, what is it and what isn't it? Well, it is a mutual commitment. And this is the point that I've been trying to make throughout the presentation. It is a mutual commitment. You need to think in terms of we and not I. And if you can get to that point, your kids are going to be the beneficiaries. What isn't it? Well, it isn't one size fits all. It isn't a helper in the classroom. It isn't just show up. Both teachers in that classroom have a significant level of responsibility. Okay? So, issues and planning concerns. I'd like you to go to the handout, the second handout in your packet, which is termed issues and planning concerns, and take a couple of minutes to talk to each other about the questions that are there and the answers that you may come up with. I'm going to ask you to take this handout and the previous handout to your next common planning meeting and talk about what you need to do and what needs to be on your agenda. Take a couple of minutes to process. And that, to me, is what's important. If you can embrace some of these things, that's great. If you can't, that's okay too, because you need to collaborate. And no one person should be directing the entire show here. You are working together. And that's what this is all about. Okay, so any questions about the issues and planning concerns, materials, the skills teaching, the lesson planning, who's going to do all those things, how does it all work? These are all things that hopefully you're doing them together. Hopefully you're doing them together. But there may be specifics that have to be assigned to one person as opposed to another. And those are the ones that we need to talk a little bit about. Okay? All right. Now I'm going to open up a little can of worms here, now that I haven't done that already. Let's take a look at a couple of sample case studies. I don't want you to say, oh, that's me. But here's one. Co-teachers are not co-planning. Without co-planning, one teach, one support model is probably the default since no specialized roles are predetermined. So this was, again, in teaching in tandem, this was given as an example of one situation that they came across. The teachers are not co-planning. Hopefully, you are not in that position. You are not in that position. And from what I've heard, it sounds like you have some structured co-planning time available to you, which is great. I've been in some schools where they, I do this whole thing on co-teaching, and they say, that's great, except we never get to talk to each other. It can't work. You've got to have that opportunity. And I would go one step further and suggest that you have an agenda so that it's not just sitting down talking about things, but sitting down and going through a structured agenda to address issues that are very real to you and to the class. Okay? The vocational education teacher is confident in his abilities and sees no reason to share the teaching. Again, it's a case study. You need to, if you're in that situation, you need to think about putting it on the table and discussing it, because that is not a common planning situation. Right? This is one person saying, I'm not really interested in this. And if you're in a situation like that, it needs to be addressed. It needs to be addressed. Special education co-teacher doesn't know how to talk with the CTE teacher about the content expectations. Again, very real possibility. And there's nothing wrong with that. The only thing that's wrong with it is you leave it at that, which is hopefully something you will not do. Any questions about any of these? Okay, so the myth, both teachers must be trained to co-teach in a CTE classroom. I'm saying that's a myth because you may not be trained to co-teach. You may say today was a training for co-teaching, okay? You don't have to be trained. You have to be flexible. You have to be open. You have to be willing to learn from each other. And as I walked around the room in the discussions, when you had the opportunity to talk about some of the handouts, I was impressed. You are willing to talk to each other and open and flexible. The special educator brings expertise in working with the individual needs of students. As a CTE teacher, you need to tap into that. You need to take advantage of that. You have the opportunity to have another expert in that classroom. The CTE teacher brings knowledge and expertise regarding the occupational skills. The special ed teacher needs to tap into that, working together. You learn from each other. We're not going to do this, but you do have in your handout the tips for successful co-teaching. I would ask you again in one of your common planning times that this tips be on the agenda, take a look at them, talk about them, and share them with each other. Okay? So, wrapping it up, the co-teaching essential factors. It's a structured process for common planning time. Effective instructional strategies to teach content-related material. Shared responsibilities. Administrative support. Outstanding communication skills. Any questions? You've been a great audience. I thank you. Let's get started. Oh, I do need you to fill out that evaluation too.
Okay. If we're short of handouts, I think the reason we were short of handouts is because our academy teachers dipped into those. I had 150 of everything, and I think that's why we ended up short. I will send these handouts out to you again in email form, okay? Thank you, Dr. Hannah. You gave us a lot to think about today. Let's just appreciate him one more time if you